Chapter 3779. He had long heard that Yang Kai had obtained a great opportunity when he entered the territory of the Become the Demon race. After returning, he had the strength of a half-saint as a high-ranked demon king. But Song Imo didn't believe it. In his opinion, Yang Kai's aptitude was indeed extraordinary, but with his cultivation realm, how could it be possible for him to surpass the gap between heaven and earth? Even if Yang Kai had the achievement of killing a half-saint, that was also the result of someone cooperating with him. But until now, when he fought with him, Song Imo found that the rumors were true. This little bastard actually had the strength of a half-saint. When this spear stabbed over, Song Imo felt the pressure of a mountain, and even found it difficult to breathe. Hastily responding, he raised his hand and slapped forward. With a loud bang, Song Imo let out a muffled groan, his figure exploding backwards while Yang Kai's body only swayed a few times before stabilizing. This result was not because Yang Kai's strength was much greater than Song Mo's, but because he had the advantage of the Black Dragon Spear. And because Yang Kai had attacked in anger, Song Imo had been forced to parry. Swish, 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 with the sound of something breaking through the air, the four half-saint of the demon race, under the lead of Jiao Long, had already caught up. As if they had already discussed, they spread out and surrounded Yang Kai and Song Imo in the middle, looking at the center of the field with mocking eyes. Today's situation was not something that could be seen casually. Compared to spending more effort to kill the fake emperor of the Star Realm, the half-saint undoubtedly preferred to see the human race kill each other. Damn it! Song Imo gritted his teeth and roared, his eyes sweeping left and right, filled with fear. When he looked at Yang Kai again, his eyes were full of hatred. Yang Kai, what are you doing? Yang Kai lowered his eyes, the long hair in front of his forehead falling, casting a thick shadow, and said in a serious voice, "The one who should die is you, old dog Song Imo." Song Imo gritted his teeth. Harming others and yourself, what good is it for you? Injustice in the heart, injustice in the Tao. Yang Kai slowly raised the Black Dragon Spear, pointed it at Song Imo, and said in a cold voice, "Today, this place will be your burial ground." Nonsense. We'll see if you can survive. Song Mo's face twitched, and his heart was filled with resentment. Previously, in order to fight for a chance of survival, he instinctively threw his companions behind him as a shield. If he was given another chance, he would still make the same choice. However, what he didn't expect was that Yang Kai's character was so unyielding. Even though he knew that the four half-saint of demon race were chasing after him, not only did he not think of escaping, he even blocked Song Mo's path, and calmly gathered harming others without benefiting himself. Vigilantly looking around. Could it be that he didn't know the consequences of being surrounded by those half-saint? When he saw the two bronze doors open, I will definitely live longer than you. Yang Kai had a premonition Yang Kai's expression that someone must have arrived at the profound heaven temple before him. He turned his head to the side and said, it was very likely that he would be lying in ambush near the entrance. Eyes were filled with a playful smile. And then take the opportunity to kill the enemy who came in. Do you think, in this situation, before he came in, you are qualified to discuss was already prepared to be attacked? Pausing for a moment, he laughed loudly. The previous round of fierce attacks would have left him dejected. If you have any last words, and the others, quickly say them. The elderly leader revealed an awkward smile, bowed, I may be able to satisfy you. He had a posture as if Yang Kai was already in his grasp. Please don't blame me. It was not that he was arrogant. Yang Kai raised his hand and said, but the advantage he had was too obvious. Master Luo is seriously injured, but we are not firmly locked onto Yang Kai. As he spoke, as long as he made the slightest of the other side, he would immediately welcome a storm of attacks. However, at that time, none of them were seriously whether or not he could use his strange space secret technique. The elder had encountered Yang Kai's emperor. They wouldn't have had a good time. He was also one of the current commander dormant for many years. He couldn't do anything. I want to kill news for Yang Kai. Moreover, you guys wait on the side to escape after I kill him. If you have any other more advantage, they would have them all. Luo Meng, as soon as these words came out, underestimated Yang Kai's strength. Yang Kai then and Lord on the contrary, Luo Meng observed the four half-saint of demon race's expressions were playful. That Yang Kai even touched his chin. Now that the heaven revealed a thoughtful expression, but they seemed to follow Yang Kai's profound heaven. This made him think a lot with him, and no matter the heaven void just now, the remaining one will eventually fly. At that time, it was very difficult to understand how to gather the opportunity king could be without actually fighting with no harm, isn't it? Everyone only knew that he had once joined forces with Luo Meng pondered for a moment and the others to kill a half-saint. You are crazy. And that was Jiao Long. Let's move forward together. There was no direct experience until just now.
Very good, definitely.
Yang Kai nodded and turned his eyes to look into the depths of the high-rank demon just now. He would not be able to fighting with Lurlan and the others. His original plan would also be so he had no time to investigate. For a moment, not even worth in a mess in his whole body. All he could see was darkness and sweating cursed Yang Kai. And even when he tried to probe with in order to deal with him, I thought I would ambush such a proposal here. Jiao Long, but I didn't expect others would not be able to entire hall, even if they shrouded in a layer of thick
sure enough,
Master Luo's peculiar fragrance was close. Master nodded and said, "Are you sure this great entrance around him?" Suddenly, Master revealed a hideous situation ahead. Are there many other entrances? Yang Kai turned his head and asked. Yang Kai shook his head himself. I don't know. And said, "As soon as we were near his direction, and saw an entrance to investigate. Maybe there are other entrances and figures emerged one after another. So I'm afraid the road ahead they were all refined. That was the case. Yang Kai smiled and said, "These refined path of cultivation not only was it a waste of time, among them it would also be difficult to achieve anything. Demon race after all, even if obviously of demon they were the result of Jiao Long's lifetime collection. That they would be able to see made his move. Yang Kai turned to Jiao and looked around and also opened his mouth. I will lead the Yang Kai's group was in the same direction as Jiao Long's group, which turned into by relying on the space fire technique and flew towards Yang Kai. Please act calmly before Jiao Long and pulled the bowstring. I'll lead the way. A succubus demon smiled charmingly. The person walking at the front even if they were dangerous. Jiao Long and no one knew they would only end up barriers or restrictions. Sure enough, profound dimensions their respective divine techniques and the others' expressions changed. He carried the world in instant. Jiao Long world changed color with them, and the world entered inside the profound young person killed by Song Mo. The dragon's roar resounded as a golden dragon flash. He absolutely she had already mentioned suddenly expanded heaven turning into 100 Zhang. How many of them are there? Raised his hand to stop the black dragon. We don't have much time. Let's not dwell on pouncing towards him. I still have the ability to protect myself. Even the boundless corpse he was so swept away. Yang Empire did not couldn't say anything more. With a backhand swing, can you be careful? He cut down one of the feather demon's arrows. He gave Bing Yin a look. Then he stretched out his hand and gently nodded the collapsing after a simple discussion. The two heaven and earth collapsed as he swallowed the dark green netherworld ghost flame to explore the fighting path, against three while Bing Yin followed closely behind. Although Yang Kai was able to resolve the attack at the first moment, ready to act at any time, the blood in his body roiled. The other spread out to the left and right, sweet in his throat. With Luo Meng and Yang inflammation, Yang Kai did not delay at all. Only a few steps away from each other, he pounced straight towards stepping into the darkness, roaring. They couldn't even see their fingers in front of them. Focus of the three half-saint divine senses were suppressed to the limit. Situation was much better. Their voices were not cut off. Attacks. They could hear each other's breathing and light spiritual energy attack at the very targeted at him. They didn't feel lonely. Song Mo's eyes glazed over for a moment, forward was neither fast nor slow. Yang Kai had already closed in on him when they entered the main hall. His murderous intent caused Song Mo's skin to turn cold. There were no dangers or restrictions as they had imagined. But no one let down their guard. Have an easy time. Yang Kai was constantly observing the situation around him with a loud bang and also paying attention to the movements of the people behind him. Song Mo's entire body at a certain moment seemed to swell when he was checking the strange patterns appeared on his exposed skin. His expression suddenly changed. Song Mo grasped at the void him, and a long just a moment ago, his hand. He could still hear a slight heartbeat and sending a sword behind him. But the next moment rang out as energy people who had been following causing heaven and earth to turn upside down and shatter. He turned around abruptly and looked back, huge body was but he couldn't see anyone else. Bing Yin, Song Mo's entire body following him closely, and not giving Yang Kai any time to breathe, had also disappeared. Jiao Long and the other two half-saint sweat oozed from his forehead. Asterisk shwa 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 asterisk three figures appeared beside Yang Kai. Of the movements icy principles filled the air. Colliding with the boundless corpse at all how the people behind him formed a seal with one hand. With his current divine soul cultivation, the three blazing flame rings flew out from Yang Yan's couldn't do it without anyone noticing. Three huge rings of fire. The only explanation was that they had triggered some kind of restriction in the Xiantian as he rushed towards the feather demon, causing him to be separated from the others. They engaged in battle. If he was like this, what about the others? What kind of dangers would there be in this restriction? Widened his eyes Yang Kai didn't know anything. Three figures that all he could do now was to be secretly vigilant on his face was extremely interesting. At the same time, he understood how Yang Yan's trio was walking in the main hall. Clearly, exclaimed they had been hiding in Yang Kai's sealed world bead for some time now. Asked immediately, such strength, such Yang Kai is gone. Song Yin almost ground his teeth to pieces. As soon as these words were spoken, if he had known that Yang Kai was hiding felt their hair stand on end. He would not have used the hair on their bodies stood on end. As long as they could join up with powerhouses. They would have the
weren't far
strength
from
of
each
6
other.
false emperors.
Even though the situation
no matter
here
how
was
strong
strange,
Jia Long was,
and their divine
the
senses were
disadvantage
greatly
in numbers
suppressed,
was enough to make
as
him
long
give
as
up.
they wanted to.
But at that time,
they could still
he
monitor
only saw
anyone's
Yang Kai
movements.
alone and was
But
fleeing.
in fact, until
how
Bing
could he
Yan
have thought
spoke,
so much at
no
the
one
moment
noticed
of life
how
and
Yang
death?
Kai disappeared.
He only thought
Even
that he
young
could use Yang
inflammation,
Kai to
who
attract
had been
the attention
closely
of the
watching
demon
Yang
race,
Kai's movements,
while he took
didn't
the
notice.
opportunity to escape.
With a whoosh,
He did
Yang
not know if his
inflammation
previous
rushed over from
actions were
behind.
seen by Yang
He looked
Yin
over
and the others,
and saw that there
if
was
they had
indeed
seen
no
it,
one in front
he
of
was
him.
afraid that he would
said
no longer
seriously,
have a
"When
foothold
did
in
he
the star
disappear?"
boundary.
If it
Just
was only
now,
Yang Kai
she
who
clearly
saw it,
heard
he was
Yang
not
Kai's
afraid.
heartbeat and breathing.
Without any evidence,
Just now,
he would never
how did he
admit that he
disappear?
had done such a
I'm
thing.
not sure.
Even if
Bing
the
Yin
demon
frowned.
race revealed
She
something,
wasn't distracted
it would
by
only be
anything else,
regarded as sowing
because
discord.
she was the closest to
It was
Yang
not
Kai.
trustworthy.
She was
Treacherous
constantly
little
paying
beast.
attention to Yang
Song
Kai.
Mo's heart was
But even
filled
she
with
didn't
grief and
notice how Yang
indignation.
Kai disappeared.
He secretly
She
blamed
only
Yang Kai
reacted
for
after
not
Yang
showing
Kai
his full
disappeared.
strength at the beginning.
This was somewhat
causing him to
inconceivable.
make such a
The
choice.
purpose of
when
her
he could
and
not
Yang
see any hope.
Inflammation's trip was
But
to
now,
protect Yang
Yang
Kai
Yin and the others were
participate in the
entangled
final
with the
battle
three
of the
half-saint
great
of
demon
Tao.
race.
Now
While
even
the
Yang Kai's
succubus
demon was
disappeared,
still dealing with
even
him.
if Bing Yin
Yang
had a
Kai
strong
was no
mind,
longer restrained.
she couldn't help but
and a
feel a
huge
little
sense of
confused
crisis
at this
instantly
moment.
enveloped
If
Song
that was the
Mo.
case, in his
Then
life,
what was the meaning
he
of
had only
Liu's
felt this way
sacrifice?
when he was suppressed
Everyone
by
be
Qiongqi.
careful. This time,
Lord Yang might
it was
have
really a
triggered some
disaster.
restriction. At this
Luo
moment,
Meng said in
a
a low
strange
voice.
change suddenly
Yang
occurred.
Inflammation
A
frowned
huge
and said,
buzzing sound rang
"If
out,
there was a restriction,
and the entire
why did he
profound
disappear
heaven temple
alone?
trembled
We
violently.
should also be implicated."
Whether it was the
Although it couldn't
half-saint
be
or the
ruled
false
out
emperor,
that the restriction
everyone
was only
present
triggered by
suddenly
one
lost
person.
their footing.
This was
and
a
their
little
bodies
too strange.
swayed.
The
And
rich
at this
world
moment,
energy
in the
between
dark
heaven
hall,
and earth
a light
quickly converged
suddenly
in one
bloomed.
direction.
This light
and
seemed
in
to
a very
come from a
short
distant
period of
location,
time,
hazy
a violent
and hazy,
energy wave
as
swept
the light
up,
spread out,
causing the ground
the
and
darkness
trees
that
to
had
sway
shrouded the hall
incessantly.
retreated a great
Everyone's
deal,
expression changed,
revealing a 10-foot
and they all
wide
stopped
passage
fighting
that
and
emitted a
vigilantly
faint
looked
light
around.
that led directly
With
to
such
the
a
place
change,
where the
it was
light came
obvious
from.
that something big
Kai
had
Yang had
happened.
suddenly disappeared,
The rumbling sound
and now
continued
such a
for a long
glimmering
time.
path had appeared.
This is everyone was
Song Mo's
confused.
eyes widened,
Standing
and he
on
looked
this
up in a
path,
certain
there
direction,
wasn't any danger,
immediately revealing a look of ecstasy as he hissed.
Instead,
There
heaven
was a
void
faint
cauldron
calling coming from
in
the
the direction
front,
he was looking,
as if the target they were
square
searching for
cauldron
was right in
suddenly
front of them.
appeared.
After
This
a
huge
moment of
cauldron
silence,
was engraved with
Luo Meng
countless
said,
mysterious
"Master
patterns
Yang
and patterns
inflammation
that flickered
although
and
Lord
flowed
Yang is
incessantly
missing
with his ability.
These patterns seem
I
to
don't
be
think
in
anything
accordance
will
with
happen
the
to him
principles
easily.
of the great Tao.
If he escapes,
causing
he will
everyone who
definitely
saw
go
this
to that
huge
final
cauldron
place.
to be absent-minded
Why don't we
for
go
a
first
moment.
and wait for
The
him to
huge
come?"
cauldron was not a
Young
physical
inflammation
object,
was silent
but a
for a while
phantom,
before
but it was
gently nodding.
unbelievably solid.
She also knew that
As the
Luo
world
Meng was
energy
right.
in the profound
She didn't
heaven
know how
temple
Yang
madly
Kai
poured in,
disappeared, or where
the
he was
huge
now.
cauldron grew
Even
larger
if she
and
tried to
larger,
find him,
as if it
she
was
wouldn't
going
be
to
able to
contain the
find any
entire
clues.
profound heaven temple.
Instead of that, it was better to wait at the end where they
Chapter
might see Yang Kai.
3780.
Since
The
they had
world
made up their
buzzed.
minds,
The world's spiritual
everyone didn't
energy
waste
was in
any
a
more
frenzy,
time,
and the giant
immediately
cauldron
set
was
off.
revealed.
However,
The aura of
after
the great
learning
Tao
a lesson
flowed
from
from the
every
previous
corner of
incident.
the profound heaven
Everyone
palace.
was even more careful.
At this moment,
but to everyone's
every false
surprise,
emperor in the profound
no one
heaven
appeared
palace,
until they reached the end
including
of the
the
faint light
half-saint of the
passage.
demon race.
At the end of the
couldn't
path,
help but
there
feel
was a
as if an
spacious
invisible
hall.
door had
It was
been
over
pushed
1,000
open in
feet
front of
tall,
them, and had
behind
huge
that
space.
door was the peak of
At the
martial
center
arts
of the hall
that they had been
there was
pursuing
an
all
ancient
their lives.
cauldron that was
It
slowly
was something
rotating.
that was worth paying
The patterns
any price,
around the cauldron
even their
flickered
lives.
with a faint light.
Inside the
and a
profound
dense
heaven
aura
palace,
of the great path
figures
emanated
appeared
from the
one after
cauldron.
another.
The
Turned
heaven
into
void
streams
cauldron
of light of
Luo
various
Meng
colors,
exclaimed as she
and
stared
rushed
at
towards
the
the
giant cauldron
engraved with
the heaven
complex
void
patterns.
cauldron.
This
Gonli
giant
couldn't help
cauldron
but
was
swallow
the
a
giant
mouthful
cauldron
of saliva that had been
Only
projected
at this
into
moment
the world.
did he confirm
Although
that
it
the
had shrunk
information he
countless
received
times
from the
it
star
was still
boundary
several
was
meters
correct.
tall.
There really
wasn't
was a
just
heaven
Luo
void
Meng
cauldron
whose
in
eyes
the
were
profound
burning.
heaven palace.
The eyes of the
and the
six
key to becoming
pseudo-emperors
great
present
emperors
also
was in the
burned
heaven
with
void
desire at
cauldron.
this moment.
Although his heart
Long
was
before
restless,
entering the
and he
profound
had the
heaven
urge to
palace,
rush to the giant
everyone
cauldron
knew
to
that
take
they
a
had
look.
to find the heaven
half half-saint of demon race was watching him covetously, but no one knew where the heaven void cauldron was. Rashly. At this moment, on the other side, the key to becoming great emperors had finally appeared for a moment of everyone's eyes, then turned back to look at a headless corpse not far away. The heaven void cauldron. It was the man surnamed They could become great emperors, who had been trapped by Tsang previously. A figure flashed although he had only died for a short while, the twisted head and the headless corpse had already turned one of his companions had already made the first move. A hint of contemplation flashed through the pseudo-yellow eyes of the star boundary. Was this the final step? The half-saint of demon race to the other half-saint of demon race. But at the last moment, Jiao Long knew more about the situation inside the profound heaven palace. Luo Meng was startled, on the first day of their journey to the profound heaven palace. After him. Shueli had summoned him to the Star Soul Palace, and the other pseudo-emperor were not willing to be left behind. No one knew what Shueli had told him that night, and only Jiao Long were left. The other
two
half
women
saint
looked
of
at each
demon
other.
race only
They
knew
didn't
that after
expect to
entering
reach
the
the
profound
deepest
heaven
part of the
palace,
profound heaven
they had to
palace
kill as many
so
false
easily
emperors as
and find the
possible in the
heavenly
star
cauldron
boundary
so
as
easily.
possible.
As a
But
result,
there was no need to
the battle for the
specifically tell
great
them
Tao
this.
had reached the
Even
most
if the
critical
human
moment.
race and demon
Even
race
if they
ran
didn't
into
want
each other
to,
outside,
who could remain
they wouldn't
unscathed
turn a
in this
blind
vortex.
eye. Not to
Understanding
mention that
each
this
other's
was the
meaning,
profound
young
heaven
inflammation
palace,
shouted,
where everyone competed
"Let's
for the
go!"
great Tao.
Activating
Only
his
Jiao
emperor
Long
Qi.
knew that the
He
key to
and Bing
becoming
Yun
great
rushed forward
emperors
together.
in this heaven and earth
Now that
secret
Yang Kai
realm
was not here,
was inseparable
their
from
previous
death
mission
and
was
slaughter.
meaningless.
Only when enough
Regardless
blood
of
was
whether
spilled
Yang
would
Kai
the
was
key be
alive or
revealed.
dead.
The death
Who
of
could
the
turn a
man's
blind
surnamed
eye to
foam
the
was
great Tao
undoubtedly the
opportunity
last straw
that
was
broke
right in
the
front of
camel's
them.
back.
However,
Now,
at this moment,
the giant
a sudden
cauldron
change
had
occurred.
revealed itself.
All of a sudden,
And the final moment
violent
of the
energy
struggle for the
erupted
great
within
Tao
the
had
palace.
arrived.
As a
All
series of
forbearance
figures emerged from
schemes
all
were
directions
useless at this moment.
One ability
If they
after
wanted
another
to
was
obtain the
hurled
only
toward the person
opportunity
closest
they
to
could
the
only
heaven void
rely on their
cauldron.
own abilities.
This person was
With a
none
loud
other than
bang,
the pseudo
the energy
emperor,
exploded.
who came here
Everyone
with
was
young
shocked
information
and turned their
and
heads
the others
to look at the source
and was
of the
the first to
commotion,
rush out,
only to see
seeing
Yang
this,
Kai's
Luo
ferocious
Ming's
expression
expression
changed
towards
drastically,
Song
and
Mo.
she shouted,
The black dragon
"Brother
spear
Zhou, watch
swept
out!"
out, and Song
The
Mo
man
flew
surnamed
backwards,
Zhou was also
spitting out
taken
blood
aback.
in midair. Just now, when
He
the
thought
giant
that he
cauldron
and the
was
others had
revealed,
arrived first,
everyone's
and
attention
could
was
enjoy the
drawn to
benefits
it.
of being in
He
a
and Yang
favorable
Kai were no
position.
exception,
But who knew
however,
that this was not
Yang
the case?
Kai came back to
At
his
this
senses
moment,
a little faster.
He turned his head
and launched
and
a
saw
sudden
passages
attack.
appearing all
He couldn't
around the
completely
hall.
block it.
From these passages,
That violent energy
figures
surged
flew
over,
out one after
causing
another.
his internal organs
Among these
to
people,
churn violently.
there were
He secretly
pseudo-emperors from the
cursed
star
the little
boundary
bastard for
and
having such
half-saint
great
demon
strength.
race.
It was
Obviously,
no wonder
they
with
had
the
just
dragon's
arrived here
body
and
that was
arrived
300
almost at the
meters
same
long.
time as them.
How could
It
his
was just
strength
that
be
they had
weak?
not come through
What
the
made
same
Song Mo
glimmering
feel
passage.
even more desperate
Those who
was
attacked
that
him
after
were
being
all from the
swept by
half-saint of
Yang
demon
Kai,
race.
he was sent
Although
flying
the
straight towards
pseudo-emperors of the
Jiao
human
Long.
race
Even
were
if he
fighting for the
desperately pushed
initiative,
his Emperor Qi
it was
to
not yet
stabilize
time
his
for
body
them to kill each
It
other.
was difficult to
Even
do so.
The man surnamed Zhou felt
For a
his
moment,
scalp go numb.
grief welled up
There
in
were at
Song
least
Mo's
a dozen
heart.
divine technique
He only knew that
attacks
this
aimed
time
at
he
him.
was really doomed.
Although things had
If
happened
Yang
in a
Kai
hurry,
wanted him dead,
how could he
how
block
could so
Jiao
many
Long let him
attacks?
live?
With
At
a pale
this
face,
moment,
he was
raised his
surrounded by
hand
enemies
and
on all
many
sides,
artifacts,
a
turning
situation
them
where
into
there was
layers
no
of
chance of
protection
survival.
around him. Seeing Yang Kai in front of him thrusting his spear towards him again,
Chapter
filling his field
37
of vision with
83,
the silhouette
with
of a
series
giant
of
black
rumbling
dragon.
sounds.
As
Song
the
Mo's
energy
eyes
wreaked
filled
havoc,
with despair.
the layers of
However,
seemingly
at this
decent
moment,
defenses
a figure
crumbled like
suddenly
paper,
flashed past
layer
him.
by layer.
Then,
Unable
huge
to
monster
withstand a
suddenly
single
blocked
blow,
in front of
with
him.
a muffled groan,
The huge monster
a figure
that
was
suddenly
sent flying
appeared
back,
emitted an
covered
extreme
in
stench
blood
of
and with a
corpse.
weak aura.
Large pieces
Luo
of
Ming
rotten
reached
flesh
out
fell from
and
its
caught
body
this figure
and
before
landed
his
on the
heart sank.
ground.
At this
Creating
moment,
deep pits
this
one
man
after
surnamed
another.
Zhou's Emperor
This
Qi was
behemoth was
fluctuating.
none other than
His
Jiao
face
Long.
was as pale
At
as
this
paper,
moment,
and his
Jiao
body
Long
was
had
covered
used
in
some kind
wounds.
of secret technique.
He was obviously
and his
seriously
body
injured.
suddenly expanded
This was
by
not
more than 100
surprising.
meters.
With so many
Although it was
half-saint
not
of demon
comparable
race
to Yang
attacking
Kai's
together,
100-meter-long
even
dragon
Li Wu
body,
Yi would not be
it
able
was
to
still
resist.
extremely
Let alone
extraordinary.
this man
A
surnamed
monstrous
Zhou,
aura
who was
burst out from
completely
his body
focused on the
and met
heaven
Yang
void
Kai
cauldron.
head-on.
Everything
In
had
an
happened
instant,
in a hurry.
A fierce battle
So it was
between
already
a
his
dragon
limit
and a
to
tiger
arrange layers
ensued.
of protection.
Seeing this scene,
But those layers
Song
of
Mo was
protection
both
were not
surprised and
completely
delighted.
useless.
He was
At the
surprised
very
that
least,
Jiao Long
they had
did
not
not
take
take
the
the
opportunity to
being
kill him,
seriously
but
injured at
instead
this time was
bypassed him to
tantamount
face
to
Yang
losing the
Kai.
qualification
He was delighted
to
that
compete
no
for
one
the
had the
great
time
Tao.
to pay attention
Brother
to him
Luo,
at this
the
moment.
man surnamed
Without
Zhou opened his
stopping,
mouth.
Song
coughed
Mo
up
used
another
the power
mouthful
of
of
Yang
blood.
Kai's spear to
His
quickly
face looked
escape.
even more dispirited,
Even after flying a
and
long
his eyes
distance,
were filled
he
with
could still
regret.
hear the rumbling
He had
sounds
cultivated
behind
for
him,
a lifetime,
as well
and
as
reached
young
this
Kai's
point,
angry and
but he had
unwilling
failed
roars.
at the last moment.
After surviving
How
the
could he be
disaster,
willing to accept this?
Song Mo found
He
that
regretted
his
being
clothes
the
were
one
soaked
to
and
stand
sweat.
out.
At
But
that
who
moment,
would have thought that
he really
so many
thought
people
he was
would
going to
be
die
here?
on the spot.
Brother
But
Luo,
who
go
knew
ahead.
that at the last
This
moment,
Zhou
will heal
There
first.
was a glimmer of hope.
The man surnamed
However,
Zhou said
on
with
second
difficulty
thought,
before turning his
Jiao Long
head
to
to
let
look
him
at
go
the
so
heaven void
easily.
cauldron.
It was
What
likely
he saw
that he
was
did
another
not have
false
good intentions.
emperor from the star
The
boundary.
joy on his face
rushing
faded
towards the
and
heaven
was
void
covered with a
cauldron
layer of
with a
haze.
fiery look on his
However,
face.
it was
His
useless
figure
to think
flickered
about
as he
this
rushed
now.
towards the
The
heaven
most
void
important
cauldron.
thing now was to
However,
rush to the place
before he
where the
could get
giant
close to the
cauldron was
heaven void
revealed.
cauldron,
Such a
he was
heavenly
stopped
vision
by
was
an invisible
undoubtedly a
force,
kind of guide.
as if there
Now
was an
all the
invisible
false
barrier
emperors and
around the
half-saint
heaven void
stage
cauldron.
cultivators,
If this
who were
barrier was
still
not
alive
broken,
in profound
no
heaven
one could
could approach
approach
it.
it. Converging there.
During this delay,
If he was
many
late,
more attacks
he was
came.
afraid that
The
others
man's
would beat
face
him to
changed
it.
drastically,
Thinking
and
of
he
this,
hurriedly dodged.
Song Mo
But
threw
he was
away
still
all
hit
the
several
distracting
times,
thoughts in his heart,
causing blood to
and
spurt
stuffed
out
a
from
few
his
spirit
wounds.
pills into
More
his mouth.
people rushed to the heaven
Recovering
void
as he
cauldron,
hurried along.
but without exception,
In the battle just now,
they were all
he was not
stopped
injured
by the invisible
although
force.
Yang Kai's attack
At
was
this
terrifying.
moment, The half-saint of the demon race attacked
although he
fiercely,
spat out a few mouthfuls
completely
of blood.
disregarding the great
It was not a big
opportunities
deal,
contained
and
in
would
the
not
heaven void
affect him in
cauldron,
the upcoming
and
battle.
taking advantage
At this
of the
moment,
opportunity,
Yang
to
Kai
kill
and
the star
Jialong
boundaries
each had
three
false
helpers
emperors
by their side.
One side
Each
was
of them had
scattered like
found their
sand,
target,
while
and
the
were
other
fighting
side
in full
came
swing.
prepared.
The result could be imagined.
Watching Song
In the
Emo
blink of
escape
an
without
eye,
being able
the
to do
astral
anything,
realm suffered a great
the anger
loss.
in Yang Kai's
In just
heart
a dozen
surged
breaths of
fiercely,
time,
like an
a
erupting
false
volcano,
emperor from the astral
as if
realm
it wanted
died to burn
tragically
the
on
world
the spot.
together.
After
He showed
suffering
no
a
mercy
few
in his
losses,
attacks.
the many
Using
fake
the space
emperors
divine
of the star
technique,
boundary,
soul attack,
no longer rashly
dragon race
approached the
secret
heaven void
technique,
cauldron,
and various
everyone
other
could
methods
see
to
that
beat
although the
Jialong
heaven
until he
void
was
cauldron had
overwhelmed.
appeared,
However,
it was not yet
in
the
the end,
critical
Li
moment.
Wuyi was the
It was
focus of
meaningless
Yang
to
Kai's
fight for it
attention.
at this time.
This guy
It
was
was
indeed
better to
more
take
powerful
advantage of this
than the other
opportunity
half-saint
to kill
of
a
demon
powerful
race
enemy.
cultivators.
A
No
chaotic
matter
battle
what kind
broke
of
out.
method he used,
Lights flickered
he was
everywhere
able to
in the
resolve
huge
it
hall.
at the critical
The
moment.
might of emperor
Even
treasures
Yang
and
Kai
demonic
could not
treasures
leave a single
blossomed,
wound on him,
causing endless
Jialong
rumbling sounds
obviously
to ring
knew
out.
that the true meaning of
Miserable
martial
cries
Dao
could
was
be
heard
heard
from
from
time
and
to
difficult
time.
to deal with.
In this battlefield
any
that only
case,
belonged to
it
fake
was
emperors and
impossible for him to
half-saints,
let Yang Kai
any
hurt him.
carelessness could
As a
become
result,
a fatal flaw.
the battle
As
between
the battle
two
continued,
seemed a little funny.
both sides suffered
Jialong's
casualties.
cultivation was
Corpses
obviously
fell
higher
from the
than
sky
Yang
one
Kai,
after another.
but the scene of the
Before
battle
they could
seemed
land
to be
on the
suppressed
ground,
by Yang
their
Kai.
vitality
However,
disappeared
he was
without
like
a
a sturdy
trace,
wooden boat,
turning them into
cutting
dried
through the
corpses.
waves in the stormy
The
sea.
heaven void
It
cauldron
seemed
that
that he
stood
was
in
in
the middle of
danger
the
of
hall
capsizing at
seemed
any
to be
time,
rotating at
but
a
in
slightly
fact,
faster speed.
everything was under his control. After fighting
pure
for a
grand
while,
mist Yuan Qi
Jialong
inside
suddenly
the cauldron
laughed
slowly
loudly.
grew.
Let's stop
Expanding
here.
and contracting
No matter
rhythmically.
what, you can't do
As if
anything
something
to
was
this
about to
king.
break out of the
While
cauldron.
speaking, he jumped
Inside
out of
the
the
hall,
battle. While the
Yang
fake
Kai
emperors
held
and
the spear with
half-saints
one
were
arm,
fighting,
his eyes
Yang
cold.
Kai was in an empty
Although he
space.
wanted to kill the
Without
enemy,
him noticing,
he knew that
he was
Jialong
separated
right.
from Yang Yen,
His cultivation
and the
was
others,
currently
and
his
directly
biggest
came to this
shortcoming.
strange space.
Facing a half-saint
There was not
of
much
demon
fear,
race cultivator
nor
like
did he sense
Jialong.
any dangerous
It was
aura.
really difficult for him
Instead,
to
he felt
use
a
his
sense of
abilities.
peace.
As if he
Continuing
had
to
returned
fight would
home.
only be a waste
This
of time.
feeling was fascinating.
However,
Making
Jialong's
one
actions
want to
made
stay
it
here forever
seem
and
as
sink
if he
into
was
oblivion.
deliberately saving
As soon as this
Song
thought
Emo.
appeared
He could
in
have
Yang
taken
Kai's
the opportunity
mind,
to
a
seriously
cool sensation
injure or even
instantly
kill
woke him
Song
up.
Emo.
This was
But
the
he let
effect
him
of
go.
the soul-warming
Instead,
lotus.
he went to
Only
entangle
when
Yang
his soul
Kai,
was affected
making
would
it
the supreme
impossible
treasure
for
of
Yang
Yang
Kai
Kai
to
escape.
The
His
soul-warming
intentions
lotus
were so
have
obvious
such a reaction
that anyone who
Yang
was
Kai
not
was
blind
startled.
could see it.
He had clearly
At this
been
time,
vigilant enough,
Song Emo
but he
had
had still
probably run
almost
off
been
to God
bewitched.
knows where.
Furthermore,
So there was
naturally
nothing
no
in this
need for
strange
him
space
to continue
Yet he
entangling.
had such thoughts
What's
just
more,
by being
the
here.
heaven void
What the
cauldron
hell
had
is
already
this
been
place?
revealed.
Just as
So
he was
who would
feeling
have the heart
puzzled,
to fight here?
a bell-like voice
Therefore,
suddenly
when
sounded in his
Jialong
mind.
retreated,
What is
Yang
heaven
Kai
and
did
earth?
not stop him.
Who is it?
As soon as
Yang
they
Kai
stopped
shouted
fighting
in a low voice.
the other three battlefields
around
also
but
stopped
found nothing.
fighting.
This
In the blink of
strange
an
space
eye,
was empty.
the storm
And
calmed
there was
down.
no one else
8
besides
pairs
him.
of eyes
He
collided
couldn't
in the
help but
void,
frown.
causing sparks
Now that
to
he
fly.
thought about it,
Jialong
the voice
grinned
just
and
now
said in a
didn't seem
booming
to have
voice,
come from outside.
"The key to the battle
but
of the
rather from
great Tao
inside
has
his
been
body.
revealed.
But
What is heaven
this
and
is
earth?"
just the beginning.
The voice sounded
Yang
again.
Kai.
Yang
I hope
Kai
you have
became
the
alert
ability
and
to
quickly
survive
asked,
until the end.
"Who is it that
This
is sneaking
king wants
around?"
to kill you with his own
There was no
hands.
reply.
Don't
After
worry,
waiting for a
you
while,
will only die in
the
my
voice
hands.
sounded again,
Yang Kai
asking
coldly
the same
snorted.
question again.
Jialong said,
"What is heaven
Then
and
I'll
earth?"
take my leave first.
This attitude of
See you
not
later.
wanting to give up
Corpse
until
Chi
it got an
swept up
answer
the other
gave
three
Yang Kai a
half-saint realm
headache.
cultivators.
If it was a physical
Turning them
enemy,
into filthy
he could make a
objects
scene and
flew
flee towards
towards
the giant cauldron. But now that
Let's
he
go
couldn't
too.
even figure out
Yang
the
Kai's
source of this
huge figure
voice,
quickly shrank
Yang Kai
and
was
gradually
at his wit's
turned
end.
into his original
After
body.
pondering for a
Under
moment,
the surge of
Yang
space
Kai said in a
principles,
clear voice,
he wrapped young
"Heaven and earth
information
give birth
and
to
the
all
others
things.
and teleported
All
away.
things in the world
Seeing
depend
this,
on heaven and
Gonli
earth.
secretly
All
breathed
things
a
are
sigh
heaven
of
and
relief.
earth." But at the
After
same
saying
time,
this,
he felt a
Yang
little
Kai became
self-deprecating,
vigilant of his surroundings.
feeling that he had gauged
After
the heart
waiting
of
for
a
a long
gentleman
time,
with his own pettiness.
the voice didn't sound
Just
again.
now, he was
Yang
worried
Kai
about
raised
what
his
to
brow
do if Yang
slightly
Kai
asked
wondering
them
if
to
he
enter
had
the
passed.
mysterious small
Just
world
as he
again.
finished thinking
Previously,
this, the voice sounded
he was willing
again,
to stay in the
still as loud
mysterious
as a
small
bell,
world, shaking
because
his
he
eardrums
considered
and
that there
shaking
was
his
strength
mind.
in numbers.
What is Tao?
And it would be safer
With
to
his
stay
previous
together.
experience,
Now that the heaven
young Kai
void
didn't
cauldron
compete
had
with it
appeared,
this time.
if he
Instead
entered the
replying,
mysterious small
Tao
world
is the
again,
law. The
it
law
would be
eternity,
tantamount to
the
handing
origin of
everything
all
over
things
to
in the
young
world.
Kai.
What is Tao? This
If
time,
young Kai
the
did
voice
not let
didn't
him
stop
out of
at
the
all and
mysterious
sounded
small
again.
world,
Kai Yang's
he would
brow
definitely
wrinkled.
miss out
Did
on
he
this
answer
battle of the
incorrectly?
great Tao.
This
Sorrow and
was
joy are
something he
Tao,
did not
birth,
want to
old
happen
age,
no matter
sickness
what.
and death are Tao.
Now, it seemed
Ripe
that
melons
young
fall
Kai's
as
actions
Tao.
were quite
Successful
straightforward.
retreat is Tao.
Obviously,
Man follows
he had
earth.
also considered
Earth follows
this point.
heaven.
Heaven
So
follows
instead of
Tao.
letting
Tao
them
follows
enter the
nature.
small sealed
What
world
is Tao?
again,
Hard
young
as
Kai
Tao.
didn't hesitate
What is
to
Tao?
expend even more
Tao is
effort
the
to
road
carry
under
them
one's
forward.
feet. Looking up, Gon Li's
All
heart
things
was
in the
burning
world,
with excitement.
Even a tree or
Now,
a grain
the
of
key
sand
to the battle
have
of the
their
great
own
Tao
Tao
had been revealed.
This Tao is their
but
destiny,
no one knew what
their
to do
existence,
next,
their Tao.
let alone
What
what
is
was
Tao?
inside the giant
At
cauldron.
first,
Young
Since
Kai
the giant
needed to think
cauldron
for a while
appeared,
to answer.
it had been madly
but as the voice
absorbing the
asked,
world energy
Young
in the
Kai
sealed
answered
world
faster
secret
and
domain,
faster,
rolling
as if he
up
was no
waves
longer
of energy
asking
without
questions,
stopping for a
but
moment.
asking questions
As
from
the
his
world
own
energy
heart.
was absorbed,
As the words came
the giant
out,
cauldron grew
Young
bigger
Kai
and
couldn't
bigger
help but feel
until
as
its
if the
stood
dark
tall.
clouds had been
At a
lifted,
certain moment,
and the moon was
the giant
revealed.
cauldron suddenly
Many
calmed
thoughts in
down,
his mind
and
suddenly
the
became
complex
clear,
patterns
and he
engraved
felt
around
refreshed.
it flashed dazzlingly.
What is Tao?
Making the
Young
aura
Kai
of the
lowered
great
his head
Tao
and
in the
grinned.
sealed world's
What is
secret
Tao?
domain thicker and
After
thicker.
a slight pause,
Whether
his
it was
lazy
the
gaze
half-saint
became firm.
demon race,
Don't
or
ask
the
if you
human
keep
race's
chattering
false
like
emperor,
this. I am Tao.
everyone showed a thoughtful
Asterisk
look at this
Kong.
moment.
Asterisk
Their
as if something
understanding
had
of the great
exploded
Tao
inside his
deepened
body.
imperceptibly. The surrounding space suddenly shattered, like a broken mirror,
Chapter
peeling off piece by
3781.
piece.
The
The
fog
fog
in
in
front
front
of him was swept
the
away,
giant cauldron
and
shattered
he suddenly
disappeared
appeared
without
without
a
a
trace
trace
in the blink of an
Before
eye.
Young Kai had
Young
time
Kai
to
felt as if
investigate
he
his
had fallen
surroundings.
into an ice
He
cellar.
felt many
He
gazes
stopped
focused on
abruptly
him
and
from all
stared blankly
directions.
ahead.
What's
Turning
going
his
on?
head, Young Kai
The
grinned.
Heaven Void
There
Cauldron
are
was
quite
the
a lot
key
of
to the
people
battle of the great
inside
Tao.
the hall.
After waiting
Two
for
groups
so
of
many
people
days,
were clearly
it
separated.
finally appeared.
One
But
side
it
was the
suddenly
false
shattered.
emperor of the
If
star
this was the
boundary,
case,
and the
wouldn't
other
it
side
mean
was
that
the
everyone would
half-saint
return
from the demon
empty-handed
territory.
this time?
In each
But
camp,
soon,
there
Young
were more
Kai
than 10
calmed
people
down
because although the
and the
giant
demon
cauldron
race
had
had
shattered,
slightly more half-saint
the aura
than
of
the
the
great
great Tao
boundary
in the
side.
world had not
But
disappeared.
at this moment,
Instead,
almost all
it had
of the
become
false
even
emperors
denser.
and half-saint
Moreover,
present were injured.
The giant
Young
cauldron
Kai
was
saw
only an
Jialong
illusion,
in the demon race's
as if it was a
camp.
projection
Even
of
this
the real
guy had a
heaven void
huge and
cauldron.
ferocious wound
The
on his
collapse of the
chest,
illusion did
showing
not
what
mean
kind of
that
cruel
something had
struggle
happened
he had
to the heaven void
experienced.
cauldron
In
itself.
addition to these two
Therefore,
groups of people,
he only paused
there
for
were
a
also
moment
dried
before
corpses
continuing to
scattered
fly
around the
forward.
hall.
As
Judging
time
from the
passed,
clothes of
Young
these
Kai's
dried
expression
corpses,
gradually
there
became
were false
strange.
emperors from the
The
star
aura of the
boundary
great Tao
and
in the
half-saint
world
of
was so
demon
dense
race
that he had an
and there were
impulse
more
to
than
stop
20 to 30
and take a
corpses.
good look at it.
This time,
But if he really did
no more
so,
than 70
it would
people
be a
had
foolish
entered the
thing to lose
mysterious
a watermelon
temple.
for a sesame
Among
seed.
these 70 people,
So even though he longed
there were
for
30
it, he
false
suppressed
emperors
it.
from the star
However,
boundary,
the wanton
and 40
aura of the
half-saint
great
of
Tao
demon
could
race.
indeed provide
If
great
the
benefit
masters who
to
had
all
died
false
outside the
emperors and
mysterious
half-saints,
Tian temple
although
before
they
were
were limited
included,
by the world,
then those
and
who
could
were
not
still
advance
alive
to the
and
level
still had
of
the
great
strength to
emperors
fight
were
were
gathered
demon
here.
saint.
The
With the
battle of the
nourishment
great
of the
Tao
aura of the
finally
great
revealed
Tao.
its ferocious
As long
fangs
as they
here.
could leave the
It had
profound
only been a
heaven
little
temple
more than a
alive,
month since the
their strength
mysterious
would
Tian
definitely
temple
improve
opened.
greatly.
And in
What
this
a
short
pity.
period of
Young
time,
Kai suddenly
the
thought
number
of
of
Li Wuyi,
masters who had
with
died
Li
in the
Wuyi's
star
ability,
boundary and
if
demon
he had come
territory,
here, was
the
as high as
benefits he
40
could have
to 50.
obtained would have been
This
unimaginable.
kind of thing was unimaginable
and there was
in
a
the
high
past,
chance that
but
he
in
could
the
have obtained
mysterious
the only
Tian temple,
opportunity.
death had
However,
become a common
for the
occurrence.
sake of the star boundary,
Young Kai, are
and
you
for
okay?
the sake of the
Young
common people,
Inflammation's voice
Li
came.
Wuyi took the
When she
initiative
saw
to
Young
give
Kai
up this
appear here,
opportunity.
she was pleasantly
Such a sacrifice
surprised,
could be said
although
to be
she
cutting
felt
off
that
his
Young
own
Kai
path,
was in good
which
condition.
was both admirable
She was
and
still a little
distressing.
worried
That he might have
Fortunately,
encountered
Young
some
Kai
accident.
had collected a lot
Young
of
Kai
worldly
shook his
source
head.
liquid this
I'm
time.
fine. He could
Not
give
only
some
was
to
he
Li
fine,
Wuyi later,
after the
and
strange
it should be able to
experience
make
just
up
now,
for his loss.
he felt
The
surprisingly
aura of the
good,
worldly source
as if
liquid
something in his
contained
body
in it
had
was not
loosened.
inferior
Looking
to the
over,
aura of the
he
great
saw
Tao
the
in the
concerned
profound
eyes of
heaven
Young
temple.
Inflammation and
Do you
Bing
smell
Yin.
anything?
Not only
Frozen
that,
Cloud
he also
suddenly
saw
asked,
Sheng Yuzhu in the
as she
crowd.
spoke,
When
the
their
wings
eyes
of her
met,
nose twitched
Sheng
slightly.
Yuzhu smiled slightly
A
while
fragrance.
Young Kai nodded.
Young Yin
His
immediately
eyes swept
replied.
across the crowd.
She had obviously
and when he
also
saw one of
sensed
them,
it. His
after
face
the two of them
immediately
finished
turned cold
speaking,
and murderous
Gon
intent
Li's
surged.
surroundings were
Old
indeed
dog
filled
Song
with a
Mo.
faintly discernible
You still
fragrance.
have the face to show up.
It was a fragrance
Song
that
Mo
he had
looked
never
at Young
smelled
Kai
before.
with a face full
It
of
was
resentment.
indescribable,
But he
but
did
it
not
made him
say a
feel
word
happy.
in the face of his
Even
curses.
the fatigue from the
This was
previous
because he
battle
knew
was
what he
swept
had
away,
done,
making
making
him
him
feel
feel
refreshed. arguing with Yang
Although
Kai
Yang
would
Kai
only
was
expose
hurrying
what he
along,
had done.
he was
When the
still
time
able
came,
to smell this
there
fragrance.
would be no place for
At
him
first,
in the star boundary.
this fragrance was not
Many
very
false
obvious,
emperors frowned
but as
when
he
they
moved
heard
forward,
this. It became more and more distinct.
although they knew that
Of
Yang
it.
Kai and Song
Of
Yimou
it.
had a grudge,
With his
it was
divine
just a
sense,
personal grudge.
Yang Kai could
No one
sense
knew
that
why
many
Yang Kai
powerful
suddenly
auras
attacked
had
this
broken
time.
into his monitoring
Yang
range.
Inflammation sent a
These
voice
auras
transmission.
included false emperors
Let's
from
talk
the
about
star
Song
boundary
Yimou
and
when we
half-saints
return.
from the demon race.
Right now, it is more
But
important
now,
to deal
everyone
with the
was
current
attracted by the
situation.
heaven void cauldron.
Yang Kai gently
and was
nodded
rushing
when he
over
heard
from all
this,
directions,
and his figure
so
flashed
no one was
as he
in the
rushed
mood
to
to
fight
fight
with
with
others.
boundary people.
At this moment,
Although he wanted to
everyone
take
in
this
the profound
opportunity
heaven
to stab
temple
Song
was doing
Yimou
one
to death.
thing.
If he
Rushing
really
to
did,
the location
it
of
would
the
only
heaven
make
void
a fool of
cauldron,
himself in
the
front
heaven
of the
void
demon
cauldron
race.
was located
It
in
was
a
very
bronze
likely
hall.
that he would
The
break
bronze
the
hall
strange
was
peace in
majestic
front
and
of him,
ancient,
and no one knew when it had existed. Just by looking at it, one would
Chapter
feel an ancient and
3784,
desolate aura,
as if it wanted to
even
pull
though
one
Yang
into an
Kai's
extremely
killing
intense
ancient
surge
era.
like a tide.
Yang Kai
He
had
could
the
only
space divine
secretly
restrain
restrain
himself.
So although he was
Arriving
arriving
in
in
front of
far
Yang
away,
Yan,
he
Yang
had
Kai
arrived
whispered,
early.
"What happened before?" At
The
a glance,
tragic situation in front of him undoubtedly showed that before he arrived,
the surface of the hall
the
was
human and
modeled with the
demon
flowing
sides,
time great
had
emperor,
experienced an
and the hall
unprecedented
exuded
war
an aura that
and the
made
cause
people
of this
want to
war was
worship it.
definitely related
That
to
aura
the
was
great
like the
Tao
will of the
opportunity.
world.
The
In
heaven
an
void
instant,
cauldron is here.
Young Kai felt
Yang
something
Yang pointed
stirring
behind
in his
Yang
body.
Kai,
Resonating
Yang Kai
with
looked
the
back
bronze
and
hall.
narrowed his eyes.
He understood that
Behind
this was
him,
a trace
in
of
the
the will
center
of
of
the
the
hall.
world in his body,
There stood a
and
simple
before
giant
the heaven
cauldron.
void cauldron
It seemed
appeared,
to have emerged
he had
from the
relied on
ancient
the
river
guidance
of
of
history,
this, will to
flowing with
faintly
the
detect
desolate
the key
aura.
location
The giant
of the
cauldron
ascendant great
was
emperors.
engraved with countless
However,
strange
before he had
patterns.
time to
At
investigate
first glance,
carefully,
these
these
patterns
patterns
didn't
didn't
seem
seem
special,
Jiao
but
Long
upon
and the
closer
others,
inspection,
after
they
a
all
fierce
seemed to
battle,
contain the
the
truth
heaven
of the
void
great
cauldron
Tao.
appeared,
Even though
causing
he
him
had
to
seen the
lose the
giant
advantage
projection
he
of
had
the
just
heaven void
gained.
cauldron from
This
afar.
should be the profound
When
heaven
Yang Kai
temple.
saw the real thing
Although
for the
everyone
first
had
time,
called this world
he couldn't
sealed
help but
world
be
the
stunned.
profound heaven
His
temple.
mind was
Since
drawn to
ancient
the heaven
times,
void cauldron.
the profound
Giving
heaven
him the
temple
impulse
should
to
be
desperately
referring to the
study the
bronze hall in
mysteries
front of
contained
him.
in this
The
giant
profound
cauldron.
heaven temple
Moreover,
contained the
at
heaven
this
void
moment,
cauldron,
the heaven
and the
void
heaven
cauldron
void
wasn't
cauldron
empty.
contained the secrets
There was a
of
small
the
tree
ascendant
inside
great
the giant
emperors.
cauldron.
Step by
It wasn't
step,
very tall.
the greatest
Only
mystery
about
was
10
right in
meters
front
tall.
of him.
The
waiting
branches
for him
and
to
leaves were
unveil
emerald
it.
green.
It would be a lie
And
to
on one
say
of the
that Yang
branches
Kai
hung
was
a
not
fruit.
excited.
The fruit
but
was the
excitement
size of
was
a fist.
excitement, sparkling
It was
and
not the time
translucent,
for him to be
and
hot-blooded,
flowed with an
just as
inexplicable
Jiao Long
variety
had
of
said.
colors.
The appearance of the
peculiar
heaven void
fragrance
cauldron
lingered
was
at the
only
tip
the
of his
beginning,
nose,
and
and
the
rushed
final
straight
result
into
would
his
depend
mind.
on each
This
person's
fragrance
ability.
was somewhat familiar.
Taking a deep breath,
It was
Yang
the same
Kai
one
said,
he had smelled before.
"Master gone."
Young Kai
Once we
suddenly
entered the
realized
profound
that the
heaven
source
temple,
of the fragrance
it's
was
up to you
here.
whether you want to
What is
stay or
this?
leave.
Young Kai
But before
frowned.
that,
The
please lend me a
information he
hand.
obtained from Sheng
Ganli
Yuzhu
nodded
only
in
mentioned
response.
the existence
Rest
of the heaven
assured,
void
Lord
cauldron.
Yang.
Until
But
the
at this
very
moment,
last moment,
there was actually
this
a small
master's
tree
enemy
inside the heaven
will
void
always
cauldron
be the
with
demon
the fruit
race.
hanging from it.
At the same
He
time,
turned his head to
the
look at
last
Sheng
trace of
Yuzhu,
worry in his
but
heart
the latter
disappeared.
slowly shook her
He
head,
had already considered
indicating
parting
that
ways
she
with
also
Yang
didn't
Kai.
know.
He
And
didn't
the
know
others
if she
after
really didn't
entering
know
the profound
but
heaven
at this
temple.
moment, now
Young
that his
Kai
lifelong
faintly felt
pursuit
that the
was
key
right
to
in
becoming
front of
great
him,
emperors wasn't
even
the
if it
heaven
meant
void
risking
cauldron,
his life,
but
he
the
would
fruit
strive
on the
for
small
it.
tree
When
inside
the
the
time
heaven
came,
void cauldron.
he would naturally
Yang
not
Yan
be able
explained
to
to
stay
the
with
side.
Yang Kai
It
and
turned
the
out
others.
that after they had
That's
parted
good.
ways with
Yang
Yang
Kai
Kai,
laughed as his
they
space
had rushed all the way
surged.
here.
Wrapping
However,
around the
when
three
they
of them
arrived,
as they
they
rushed
found
forward,
that everyone had
there was a
gathered
large
here.
door in
When
front
they
of the
saw each
temple,
other,
a
they
bronze
naturally
door
had
that was
nothing to
several
say,
thousand feet
and a
tall.
great battle
It was
broke out.
majestic and
People
gave off an
continued to
impressive
die.
aura. And as
Both
the number
sides
of
were
deaths
wide
increased,
as
a
if
small
welcoming
tree
guests
gradually
from
grew
afar.
out of the
In
heaven
this
void
pitch-black
cauldron.
temple,
A fruit
gradually
gradually
predict
grew on
what
the
kind of
tree,
opportunities
and the
and
scene
dangers
before their
were hidden
eyes
inside.
became what it was now.
Young Kai flashed
Too
in.
many people
In
had
an
died on
instant,
both sides.
violent attacks
and
came
the
from all
remaining
directions.
people were all injured.
After a short
Death and
series
pain
of
made both
explosions,
sides gradually
someone
calm
cried out in
down.
alarm.
Before Young Kai arrived,
We're on the
both
same
sides
side.
were confronting
As the
each other.
figures crossed
This
each
is
other,
a heavenly
they scattered
source
to the
fruit.
sides.
Jiaolong's voice sounded from the opposite side. Young Kai raised his head and saw Jiaolong staring at the only fruit on the little tree with an infatuated expression. He couldn't help licking his lips as he spoke. Whoever obtains the source heavenly fruit and consumes it will be able to seize the great Tao opportunity. He cast a sideways glance at Yang Kai and said provocatively, "Do you want it? Heavenly source fruit?" Yang Kai raised his eyebrows. "Did King Yi tell you?" It had to be said that the star boundary was at an absolute disadvantage when it came to obtaining information in this battle of the great Tao. Many great emperors were trapped in an unknown space and couldn't leave. On the other hand, the half-saint of demon race had King Yi who could point out the maze in advance and let the half-saint of demon race know what the goal of this trip was. For generations, those who entered this mystery realm were all false emperors. Which one of them didn't seize the fortune of heaven and earth and obtain the favor of heaven and earth? Jiaolong didn't answer Yang Kai's question. Instead, he said, "Not to mention the false emperors of your star boundary. Which one of us half-saint in the demon territory aren't in the same situation?" Even though they were enemies, Yang Kai couldn't refute Jiaolong's words. Elites who could cultivate to the level of false emperors and half-saint were all people with great fortune and had lived a wonderful life. Take himself for example. On his path of cultivation, he had encountered countless opportunities. If it weren't for those opportunities that made ordinary people jealous, how could he have reached this step? In this world, there would always be some people who were especially lucky and didn't die after falling off a cliff. Instead, they would obtain the treasures left behind in the cave abodes of the ancient
patience, and cultivate divine arts. They could escape in one move and soar 90,000 miles into the sky,
The false emperors and half-sages standing here all had their own fortuitous encounters and opportunities. The heavenly source fruit in this mystery realm is formed from these fortunes and fortunes as nutrients. If it weren't for these fortunes and fortunes, this fruit wouldn't have appeared. Jia Long looked indifferently at Yang Kai, a playful smile appearing at the corners of his mouth. Yang Kai pondered for a moment before he furrowed his brows and said, "You mean to say that this sealed world snatched away the luck and fortune of those who died and produced this source heavenly fruit?" More or less. Jia Long's expression turned solemn. So in every battle of the Great Tao, more than half of the participants die. If they don't die, how can this fruit appear? Only when most of the participants are dead, and the heavenly source fruit is returned to the world, will the heavenly source fruit be born. The total amount of heavenly source luck is limited. The reason why only one heavenly source fruit was born this time was because only one great emperor was allowed to be born. If the bottle of heaven and earth still had the capacity, there would be more than one heavenly source fruit on the little tree. If that's the case, if I consume this heavenly source fruit, it is equivalent to stealing the fortunes and fortunes of those who died. His heart trembled. With so many false emperors and half-saint fortunes added to one person, it was no wonder the heavenly source fruit had such a miraculous effect. Of course, Jia Long said in a deep voice. Moreover, this battle of the Great Tao is different from the past. This time, we demon race will participate. Yang Kai's expression turned solemn. This is a lot of fortunes from two different universes. Jia Long's arms shook as a crazed look appeared on his face. This heavenly source fruit is more powerful than all the heavenly source fruits in the past. Whoever obtains it may stand above all the great emperors and demon saint in the future. Yang Kai took a deep breath. So that's how it is. Soon after he grinned. It seems that not enough people have died this time. Jia Long also smiled. Of course the fruit hasn't ripened yet. Although the heavenly source fruit on the little tree exuded an alluring fragrance and light flowed within it, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the heavenly source fruit had not fully ripened. There was also an invisible restriction around the heaven void cauldron that prevented anyone from approaching to steal it. However, since the fruit had already grown to such an extent, even if it wasn't fully ripened, it would be soon. Jia Long suddenly raised 3 fingers and said in a deep voice, 3. At most, we only need 3 more people to die for the heavenly source fruit to ripen. Yang Kai rubbed his chin and nodded. In other words, we only need to kill 3 more people to complete the mission. Jia Long grinned. Where do you get such confidence from? We have the advantage in numbers. Yang Kai looked at him expectantly. If we really have such a huge advantage, why are you wasting time with me? All of you are injured while I am at my peak. If we really fight, it's not certain who will suffer. Jia Long said. So I have a suggestion. Speak. 3 individual battles to determine victory and defeat, as well as life and death. No one is allowed to interfere. Life and death are up to fate. After the 3 battles, the heavenly source fruit will ripen, and everyone will rely on their own abilities. Yang Kai frowned and swept his gaze across the half-saint of demon race behind Jia Long. He faintly felt that these half-saints' injuries seemed to be more serious than he had imagined. If not, why would Jia Long make such a suggestion when they had the advantage in numbers? However, when he turned his head to look at the astral boundary camp, the situation wasn't any better. Jia Long said, if we continue to fight, no one can guarantee that they will stop. This time, whether it is your astral boundary or my demon territory, the losses are big enough. Therefore, I am willing to use the smallest price to exchange for the greatest benefits. What do you think? Jia Long was the leader of the demon territory camp. The other half-saint wouldn't object to his decision. However, there was no leader on the astral boundary territory side. Yang Kai naturally wouldn't rashly agree on behalf of others. He pondered for a moment and said, we need to discuss. Jia Long gestured with his hand, turned his head, and continued to stare at the source heavenly fruit, unable to conceal the greed in his eyes. There was no way he wouldn't be greedy. As long as he could obtain this source heavenly fruit and consume it, he would instantly rise to the ranks of the demon saint. What kind of supreme glory would that be? Moreover, as he had said before, this source heavenly fruit was different from the previous ones. It had gathered the fortunes of two different worlds. If he really consumed it, no one knew what kind of miraculous effects it would have. Yang Kai turned around and looked at the many fake emperors of the astral boundary. At this time, there were only 12 people left on the astral boundary's side, including himself. It should be known that when he entered the mysterious Heaven Palace's world secret domain, there were a total of 30 people. In just a short month, 18 fake emperors had fallen here and turned into nutrients for the source heavenly fruit's birth and ripening. Gonli, who had been following him before, was also gone. His fate was most likely tragic. Yang Kai's eyes involuntarily revealed a pained look. He took a deep breath and said, "Master, you must have heard that guy's words. What do you think?" Yang Yinyan frowned. "Do you believe him?" Yang Kai pondered for a moment. "I believe the part about the source heavenly fruit. At this point it's useless even if he lied. Moreover, I feel that the fruit is indeed the key to becoming great emperors. As for the rest," Yang Kai slowly shook his head. Bingyan said, "The information about the source heavenly fruit doesn't seem to be false. When we came here, the fruit tree didn't exist in the heaven void cauldron, but as more and more people died, the fruit tree and fruit slowly appeared." Someone else said, "If that's the case, then there's no harm in agreeing to his proposal. In any case, there's no harm to us. On the contrary, it's their side that will suffer a loss. There are only 3 battles. We still have to carefully consider who will go on stage." Chapter 3785. There were only 3 battles left, so the remaining people could rest up. Although they didn't know how long they could rest, at the very least, they would be able to avoid the risk of dying here. Regardless of whether they won or lost, they most likely wouldn't have a good ending. It was very likely that they would miss out on this battle of the Great Tao. This was a lifelong pursuit, so no one would be hot-blooded enough to take on such a task. After all, this wasn't a battle to determine victory or defeat, but a battle to determine life and death. If the source heavenly fruit wanted to fully ripen, people must die here. Sweeping his eyes over the crowd, Yang Kai opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, Yang Yin interrupted him. "Since that's the case, we'll agree to their proposal first. As for who will go on stage, we'll see what they choose first." Everyone nodded. Yang Inflammation fiercely glared at Yang Kai, warning him not to speak carelessly. Yang Kai helplessly sniffed. Turning around, Yang Kai looked at Jiaolong and said, "We've discussed it. What do you think?" Jiaolong put his hands behind his back and smiled indifferently, as if he already knew that the star boundary side wouldn't refuse his proposal. "We can accept your proposal." Jiaolong chuckled, "That's good. But these 3 battles." Just as Yang Kai was about to carefully discuss the candidates, a sudden change occurred. A rumbling sound suddenly came from the ground, causing him to pause abruptly. He vigilantly looked forward and saw that Jiaolong's expression had also turned solemn. For pairs of eyes met, and both saw the confusion in each other's eyes. They knew that the other side shouldn't have done anything. In the next moment, ripples appeared on the ground. In the originally spacious hall, a huge piece of foundation suddenly floated upwards, rising more than 300 feet in an instant before stopping. Then, 2 translucent light curtains descended from the sky, covering the star boundary side and the demon territory side respectively. It happened so suddenly that no one could react in time. By the time they saw the light curtains descending, it was already too late to escape. Roars rang out one after another as Emperor Qi and Demon Qi surged. Both sides tried their best, but without exception they all failed. 2 semicircular light screens descended, separating the human race false emperor from the half-saint of demon race. Yang Kai furrowed his brows and his body swayed. At that moment he seemed to have become illusory, but he soon solidified again. This was undoubtedly a sign that he couldn't use teleportation. The sudden appearance of the semicircular light screen actually had the effect of sealing the heaven and earth. No matter which side it was, all of them were in a state of chaos at this moment. Divine technique was constantly being launched at the screen of light, but the screen of light's toughness was far beyond their imagination. Those who launched the attacks were all fake emperors and half-saint realm experts, yet they were unable to do anything to the screen of light that sealed the world. Another series of rumbling sounds rang out as the ground within the range of the two light curtains rose, until it was more than 100 feet above the high platform in the middle before stopping. At this moment, both sides were standing on a high platform. The high platform was surrounded by a light screen. In the center, there was another high platform, but this one was much larger. When all the changes stopped, the more than 20 fake emperors and half-saint realm experts all looked at each other in confusion, none of them knowing what had happened. Kai Yang furrowed his brow and looked towards the center of the high platform, but before he could get a clear look, he suddenly heard a soft rustling sound beside him. Then, a figure appeared on the side of the high platform near him. Yang Kai's eyes widened as he exclaimed in surprise, "Master Lin!" The figure who suddenly appeared on the high platform in the center was surprisingly the Dingshan Army's corps commander, Lin Rusong. This man was a good person. When Song Imo attacked Yang Kai when they entered the mysterious Heaven Temple, he even took the initiative to offer a spot to enter the mysterious Heaven Temple to calm the storm. His broad-mindedness was admirable. Yang Kai was extremely surprised, and the other fake emperors around him also exclaimed in surprise. Because Lin Rusong was standing with them just a moment ago, no one saw how he appeared on the high platform in the center. Lin Rusong himself was obviously very surprised as he suddenly appeared on the high platform, with a blank expression on his face. At this moment, on the opposite side of the high platform, a half-saint of demon race suddenly appeared. Like Lin Rusong, the half-saint of demon race did not understand the situation when he appeared and looked around blankly. On a lonely high platform, a fake emperor and a half-saint of demon race appeared strangely, less than 1,000 meters apart from each other, while the others were trapped in the light screens on the other two high platforms, unable to escape. Wasn't this situation the best interpretation of a one-on-one battle? Heaven and earth spirit, Yang Kai gritted his teeth and shouted, looking up at the sky, but there was only darkness in the hall. He had just agreed to Jialong's suggestion when such an unforeseen event occurred. It was as if there was a will in the unseen world that was paying attention to this side. Once both sides agreed, it would immediately create a one-on-one battlefield. Now no one had to worry about the other side secretly interfering. Jialong also understood this and couldn't help but grin. It seems that this heaven and earth spirit can't wait. Interesting. Previously, the human and demon race had stopped fighting, and the source heavenly fruit was not ripe yet. Now that there was an opportunity, the will of heaven and earth immediately accelerated the process of the battle of the Great Tao. They didn't even give the two sides a chance to choose a candidate to participate in the battle, and directly chose one from each camp. "Master Lin, do it!" Yang Kai shouted. Lin Rusong quivered, but he quickly reacted. It didn't matter why he had appeared on this high platform, but there was a semi-sage devil on the opposite side. So, he had to kill his opponent first if he wanted to survive. As soon as Yang Kai finished speaking, he raised his hand and summoned out a ruler. This ruler was only the length of his palm, and as he poured his emperor chi into it, it turned into a boundless number of ruler shadows that shot towards the enemy. Strange laughter rang out as the half-saint of demon race on the opposite side turned into a streak of blood-red light and rushed over, shuttling through the endless ruler shadows without taking any damage. Lin Rusong didn't panic. Although he was old and had been living in seclusion in the mountains and forests before the demon race invaded the star boundary, he still had his foundation as a fake emperor, and this ruler artifact had been refined by him for countless years, so he had long since become one with it. Seeing his opponent rush over, Lin Rusong immediately clenched his hand, and the boundless ruler shadows twisted and turned into a giant ruler that swept horizontally. Even if they didn't face this attack directly, all the fake emperors and half-saint spectators could feel the power of this attack. Even if there was a mountain in front of this ruler, it would most likely be flattened in the next moment. And the blood demon half-saint was a little overwhelmed and was directly swept away by the ruler. Cheers immediately rang out from the Star Boundaries camp. However, at that moment a loud boom rang out. The blood demon that was swept away instantly collapsed and turned into a sea of blood. It went around the ruler from both sides and enveloped Lin Rusong. Lin Rusong's expression changed, and he formed a seal with one hand, summoning the giant ruler to defend himself, once again turning into a boundless ruler shadow and bombarding the sea of blood. A large amount of blood was swept away, but the sea of blood seemed to be endless and didn't slow down at all. Lin Rusong retreated again and again, but there was no way out. There seemed to be an invisible barrier on the high platform, so he couldn't leave the range of the high platform at all. In a hurry, Lin Rusong bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. The ruler shone brightly and instantly broke through the obstruction of the sea of blood and returned to him, quickly rotating around him and turning into a solid layer of protection. This artifact was a top-grade offensive and defensive artifact. Strange laughter continued to ring out, and the sea of blood enveloped Lin Rusong like a tsunami and disappeared without a trace. The two had only fought for a few breaths of time, so it was still unknown who had the upper hand. But after Lin Rusong's figure disappeared from their field of vision, many fake emperors from the star boundary couldn't help but show worried expressions. Rumbling sounds came from the high platform, but due to the obstruction of the sea of blood, no one could clearly see what was happening inside. However, judging from the movements, it was clear that Lin Rusong and the blood demon were engaged in a life-and-death battle. How is Master Lin's injury? Yang Kai looked over with a grave expression and asked in a deep voice. Bing Yun shook his head sadly. It's not light. He had some internal injuries before, so he can only display 70% of his peak strength at most. Yang Kai's expression darkened when he heard this. He knew that Lin Rusong was most likely going to die this time. Although his opponent was also injured, judging from the attacks just now, it shouldn't be as serious as Lin Rusong's. Moreover, Lin Rusong's strength largely relied on the ruler-shaped artifact, but the sea of blood of the blood demon had a strong corrosive power. If Lin Rusong couldn't end the battle in a short time, once his artifact was corroded by the sea of blood, he would lose his greatest reliance. At that time, the situation would only become worse. This feeling of knowing that his companion's life was in danger, but not being able to rescue him was terrible. Yang Kai repeatedly tried to teleport to the high platform he was on, but he was powerless. The light curtain that shrouded the high platform had completely locked this space. Looking at the central high platform with a gloomy face, Yang Kai clenched his fists. Although he and Lin Rusong didn't have much interaction, the fact that the other party was willing to give up the quota to enter mysterious Tian Temple was still fresh in Yang Kai's mind. Such a selfless person shouldn't die here. On the contrary, the old dog Song Mo, who had plotted against his companion, was still standing on the high platform. Yang Kai looked back at him coldly, vaguely understanding what it meant to be ruthless. I hope that Master Lin will be blessed by heaven. Yang Yin sighed, but he also knew that this was nothing more than self-consolation. Fighting alone in such a closed environment, the only thing he could rely on was his own strength. Opposite him, Jia Long looked over with a smile, and after meeting Yang Kai's eyes, he reached out and wiped his neck. The fierce battle continued. Surrounded by the sea of blood, the situation inside was completely unknown. Only rumbling sounds constantly came from the sea of blood. On the high platform, demonic Qi and Emperor Qi were also fiercely colliding. Yang Kai's heart kept sinking. Too much time had passed. Chapter 3786. After a full half an hour, the commotion on the high platform slowly subsided. Under everyone's gaze, the sea of blood retreated with a loud crash, and the scene inside was imprinted in everyone's eyes. Although they were mentally prepared, when they saw the scene on the high platform, the expressions of many fake emperors on the star boundary's side couldn't help but dim. At this moment, Lin Rusong was lying in a corner of the high platform. His old body was emaciated, and his shriveled body was covered with wounds of different sizes. He was also dripping with blood from head to toe. It was a tragic sight. His ruler-shaped artifact had also fallen to the side. The ruler, which was originally overflowing with brilliance, was now dim, just like Lin Rusong's turbid eyes. There were many traces of corrosion on its surface. The shriveled body and the artifact that had lost most of its spirituality clearly showed the intensity of the previous battle. As for his opponent, the blood demon half-saint, he was half-kneeling not far away, gasping for breath. His scarlet eyes were full of murderous intent as he coldly stared at Lin Rusong, who was less than 300 meters away from him. Judging from the blood demon's condition, although he had won this battle, it was definitely not easy. Under normal circumstances, a fight between a fake emperor and a half-saint would result in both sides suffering, unless one side had an obvious advantage in strength. Staggering, the blood demon stood up, let out a strange laugh, and walked towards Lin Rusong step by step. "Elder Lin!" someone shouted. Although Lin Rusong's appearance at this moment was extremely miserable, his chest was still rising and falling slightly. Obviously he was still alive. Now both sides were arrows at the end of their flight. Even though the blood demon seemed to be in a better condition, as long as Lin Rusong still had a fatal blow, he might be able to turn the tables. But even when the blood demon arrived in front of Lin Rusong, he still didn't react. The blood demon raised his hand, and a dark red blood mist appeared on the surface of his body. He pointed at Lin Rusong, and the thick blood mist turned into blood snakes that drilled into Lin Rusong's 7 apertures. Lin Rusong suddenly opened his eyes, revealing an extremely painful expression. He looked towards the fake emperors of the star boundary, and reached out to grab at them, as if he was trying to grasp at a life-saving straw. When they met that pair of turbid yet still yearning eyes, a deep sense of powerlessness welled up in the numerous fake emperors of the star world. They felt as if there was a volcano brewing in their chests that could erupt at any moment. Watching a veteran fake emperor walk step by step towards his demise, no matter who it was, they couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. Apart from the heartache, they were also secretly worried that the next one to go up the high platform to participate in the battle of life and death would be themselves. Would they follow in Lin Rusong's footsteps? What made the fake emperors even more furious was that the blood demon half-saint actually turned his head at this moment and grinned maliciously at them, with a complacent expression on his face. Yang Kai stared at him, the coldness in his eyes like ice that would never melt. Meeting Yang Kai's eyes, Blood Devil grinned fiendishly. His mouth moved a few times. From the shape of his mouth he seemed to be saying, "If you have the ability, come and kill me." In the end, Lin Rusong was unable to turn the tables. The injuries he had suffered before were not light to begin with. Under the control of the blood demon's secret technique, he had no power to resist at all. After 10 breaths, the last bit of vitality he had left dissipated. His shriveled corpse turned into a dried corpse at a visible rate. The source heavenly fruit in the heaven void cauldron was indeed fuller, and its alluring fragrance was even richer. Seeing this scene, everyone knew that Jialong was right. Indeed, only 3 more people needed to die here for the source heavenly fruit to fully mature. At that time, the final battle of the Great Tao would begin. With a swoosh, the victorious blood demon disappeared from the high platform and instantly returned to the demon race's camp. He didn't return on his own accord, but just like before, he had suddenly entered the battle of life and death and involuntarily returned. Jialong glanced back at him and nodded slightly. "Well done." Blood demon smiled proudly and sat down cross-legged to meditate. He closed his eyes and began to heal his injuries. In the battle with Lin Rusong, he had also suffered serious injuries. If he didn't quickly recover, he definitely wouldn't be able to participate in the battle of life and death. At this moment, whether it was the fake emperors in the star boundary or the half-saint in the demon territory, an uneasy thought emerged in everyone's mind. Who will be the next to enter the battle of life and death? If it's me, who will my opponent be? Before they could finish their thoughts, there was a slight movement beside them. With their previous experience, no one panicked this time, and immediately looked towards the battle of life and death. What they saw made the star boundary people cry out in surprise. Yang Yin and Bing Yun's beautiful faces sank, because the star boundary side's candidate for the second battle of life and death was Yang Kai. When they looked to their side, Yang Kai, who was standing at the side previously, was indeed nowhere to be seen. Yang Yin suddenly revealed an anxious expression. He couldn't understand why the will of heaven and earth would choose Yang Kai to enter the battle. Didn't Yang Kai carry a part of the will of heaven and earth? Logically speaking, heaven and earth should be biased towards him. At this time, he shouldn't be allowed to enter the battle no matter what. Regardless of winning or losing this battle, Yang Kai wouldn't benefit. If he won, he would only consume his own strength. If he lost, he would end up in a miserable state. At this moment, Yang Yin even had the urge to curse out loud. This damned heavens really don't have eyes. On the opposite side, Jia Long's eyes suddenly burst with light. He stared at Yang Kai with a restless expression. He was the strongest person under the demon saint in the demon territory. He was the most powerful half-saint. If Yang Kai didn't have the space divine technique, he was confident that he could kill Yang Kai. However, whether it was outside or inside the secret realm of heaven and earth, even if he could win against Yang Kai, he wouldn't be able to kill him. Once the situation went south, Yang Kai would immediately escape. No one under the demon saint could stop his instant movement technique. However, the life and death arena was different. It had a diameter of 300 meters and was surrounded by invisible restrictions. Yang Kai's space divine technique couldn't be used at all. As long as heaven and earth chose him to enter the battle, he would definitely be able to make Yang Kai bleed here. Jia Long's eyes filled with expectation quickly turned into disappointment. When he heard a sound beside him, a half-saint of demon race appeared in the corner of the life and death arena. When he looked over, Jia Long's face immediately became gloomy. Yang Inflammation and Bing Yun's originally worried expressions also became a bit strange. Bing Yun smiled and said, "As expected of someone blessed by heaven and earth. Even at this time, he can still take advantage of the situation." Yang Inflammation also let out a sigh of relief. "Then I'm relieved." On the high platform, Yang Kai was at a loss for a moment, but he quickly reacted. He was on the life and death arena. Just as Yang Inflammation thought, he was slightly surprised. He didn't know why the will of heaven and earth would choose him to enter the battle. However, he didn't think too much about it. Since he was chosen, then the only thing he could do was to kill his opponent with the smallest price. As for whether he had this ability, Yang Kai was full of confidence. When he arrived here, the fake emperors and half-saint had already experienced a chaotic battle. They were all injured and couldn't use their full strength. On the other hand, he entered a strange space and asked about his Tao heart. Not only was he unharmed, but his thoughts were also clear. There was no way he would lose when he was at his peak state against an injured opponent. In the first battle, Astral Realm was defeated and Lin Rusong died. He had to win the second battle no matter what. Before he finished thinking, a figure appeared in the opposite corner. Yang Kai immediately looked over. When he saw who his opponent was, he couldn't help but grin. 1,000 feet away, Blood Demon, who was covered in blood and had a pale face, looked around in panic. He couldn't understand how he came back up in the blink of an eye after leaving the life and death arena. There were 14 to 15, half-saint of the demon race, and it was him both times. This probability was simply unimaginable. Jia Long's face was gloomy. The will of heaven and earth. If the opponent wasn't Yang Kai, he might believe that this was a matter of probability, but since it was Yang Kai, it wasn't so simple. Previously, everyone was guessing what kind of help the will of heaven and earth could provide to Yang Kai in this battle, but no one could say for sure. After all, there was no such record in the past. It had always been those who seized the opportunity of the great path and became great emperors who received the will of heaven and earth. However, it was the opposite for Yang Kai. Such a situation was unprecedented, and there was no precedent. And now, whether it was on the side of the star boundary or on the side of the demon territory, they all deeply felt the benefits of the invisible and inexplicable will of heaven and earth. Blood Demon fought with Lin Rusong for half an hour before. Although he won in the end, he was an arrow at the end of its flight. At this time, not to mention Yang Kai, a half-saint high-ranked demon king, even an ordinary high-ranked demon king would be able to take his life. In this battle, the star boundary would undoubtedly win. There was no need to doubt anything. It was precisely because of this that Yang Yin and Bing Yun, who saw Yang Kai enter the life and death arena, completely relaxed. In the crowd, Song Mo's face was gloomy, and the expectation in his eyes turned into disappointment. On the life and death arena, 1,000 feet away, Yang Kai looked at Blood Demon indifferently, but he didn't choose to make a move immediately. This silent oppression made Blood Demon panic. He couldn't help but turn his head and look at Jiao Long for help. It was just like how Lin Rusong looked before he died. At this moment, he seemed to have experienced the despair of his previous opponent. The light in front of him was completely shrouded in darkness. Asterisk ta ta ta. Asterisk Yang Kai stepped forward. Blood Demon couldn't help but retreat, but where could he retreat to? He was originally in the corner. The invisible barrier on the life and death arena sealed the world, so he couldn't continue to retreat. Looking over in horror, he saw Yang Kai lowering his head. The hair in front of his forehead covered half of his face, but he could vaguely see a ferocious light through the gaps of his hair. There was also a dried corpse on the life and death arena. It was Lin Rusong. Yang Kai came to the dried corpse, squatted down, and waved his hand, putting it into the small sealed world. When he got up again, he looked up at Blood Demon, who was hiding at the edge of the life and death arena, and looking at him vigilantly. He slowly raised his hand and suddenly shouted, "Die!" The wind blew. Yang Kai's figure was still in the same place, but there was another him at the edge of the arena. At this moment, Yang Kai was holding a spear with one hand, and there was a figure on the tip of the spear. Chapter 3787. The blue dragon spear pierced through the Blood Demon half-saint's chest, causing blood to flow down the spear. The Blood Demon's eyes widened as he gripped the spear with both hands, a look of shock on his face. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he spat out a mouthful of blood. The crowd was in an uproar. Even though they knew that Yang Kai would definitely not lose after seeing who was on the other side, but seeing him lift the Blood Demon half-saint up so easily still gave them a strong visual impact. In front of the furious Yang Kai, the heavily wounded Blood Demon simply had no strength to resist. The Blood Demon struggled and squirmed as he made a gurgling sound. His blood chi surged as he held back for a long time before he angrily shouted, "I refuse to accept this." If he was given a fair opportunity to fight Yang Kai alone, he would definitely not be so miserable. However, he had fought with Lin Rusong before, so at this moment, he only had less than 20% of his combat power left. Facing Yang Kai's thunderous attack, he didn't even have the chance to dodge. He was well aware of how terrifying and difficult it was to deal with a martial Dao true intent. Under this spear attack, a strange force was destroying his body and mind. His grief and indignation finally turned into a roar. Many of the Star Boundary's fake emperors who watched this scene were full of joy. They recalled how this guy had made a silent provocation to Yang Kai when he was tormenting Lin Rusong. They didn't expect him to hit the nail on the head in the blink of an eye. Sure enough, karma came quickly. This king won't let you off easily even if he dies. The Blood Demon half-saint roared again, and the power of his vitality suddenly exuded a dangerous aura. His hands quickly formed seals, and his body suddenly expanded. "Yang Kai, be careful," Bing Yin exclaimed. Looking at this situation, the Blood Demon seemed to be about to self-destruct. Even though he was now an arrow at the end of its flight, the power of a half-saint's self-destruction was not small. If he wasn't careful, he might suffer a big loss. Just a dying struggle. Yang Kai coldly snorted. The black dragon spear trembled, and a violent power was transmitted from the spear. With a boom, the Blood Demon on the tip of the spear was directly shattered, turning into pieces of bones that scattered in all directions. Before the skeletons even landed on the ground, they had already lost all of their energy and turned into dried corpses. It had only been 10 breaths of time since Yang Kai had entered the arena to the end of the battle. The Blood Devil half-saint hadn't even used a single move. Perhaps such a situation wouldn't have happened even if he had faced a real demon saint. This was definitely the fastest death of a half-saint in history. Sheathing his spear, Yang Kai coldly stared at the demon race's camp. He pointed his spear forward and shouted, "Who's next? Die!" As soon as he said this, Yang Yin frowned and said with a worried expression, "He can't be thinking of using his own will of heaven and earth to influence the next selection, right?" Bing Yun's expression changed slightly, but he nodded and said, "It's possible." There was no pattern to the two selections, so the fake emperors and half-saints present could only passively endure. However, if it was Yang Kai, it wasn't impossible for him to do as Yang Yin said, and use his own will of heaven and earth to influence the next selection. After all, the karmic luck of the heavens and earth had given him a huge advantage in the second round. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to win so easily if it was any other half-saint who had entered the arena. However, in the next instant, Yang Kai's figure suddenly disappeared from the life and death platform. By the time everyone reacted, he had already returned to the Star Boundary Camp's high platform. Yang Kai frowned and sighed inwardly. Just as Yang Yin said, he really did want to use his will of heaven and earth to exert some influence and see if he could continue to stay on the life and death platform for the third battle. Unfortunately, the result disappointed him. His gaze swept across the crowd. Since he had returned, who would go on the next battle? Under his gaze, the fake emperors all had solemn expressions. From the corner of his eyes, he suddenly saw a figure disappear. Yang Kai was shocked and quickly turned his head to look at the life and death platform. His eyes immediately shrank. Yang Yin beside him also reached out to cover her red lips, her beautiful eyes filled with worry. On the life and death platform, in the corner near the Star Boundary Camp, a white figure stood alone. There were specks of blood on her dress, and she exuded a cold aura. Bing Yin turned her head and looked around, then smiled lightly. "Is this me?" She raised her eyes and looked forward. In the opposite corner, there was also a burly figure. After seeing who it was, Bing Yun's eyes revealed a trace of bitterness. "Jialong." Yang Kai gritted his teeth and shouted. He couldn't help but want to curse. It was fine if the Star Boundary side's third selection was Bing Yun, but the Demon Race side selection was actually Jialong. This time Bing Yun was in danger. Jialong was the strongest person in the half-saint of Demon Race. Yang Kai knew that even if he encountered him, he wouldn't be able to win. His endless army of refined corpses was simply annoying, and his strength was also very tyrannical. If it was just a battle of victory or defeat, it would be fine. If he couldn't win, he would still have a chance. However, on the life and death platform, one side was bound to fall. According to Yang Kai's estimation, Bing Yun's chances of winning were less than 30%. There was a great possibility that she would die on the life and death platform. Both of them came from Hung Luo Star Field. Ever since they came out of the solitary void-sealed world, Bing Yun had been taking care of him. Later, she even accepted Su Yin as her last disciple and taught her carefully. If something happened to Bing Yun here, Yang Kai didn't know how to explain it to Su Yin and Ji Yao. Should he tell them that he watched Bing Yun get killed by Jialong without being able to intervene? Thinking about the possible outcome of Bing Yun's death, Yang Kai felt his scalp go numb. What should we do? Yang Yin was also a little panicked. She never thought of this situation. Yang Kai gritted his teeth, clenched his fists, and suddenly shot his spear forward. A violent energy swept out, but the barrier on the platform was undamaged. Instead, it scared the others. At this moment, the battle on the life and death platform began. Just like how Yang Kai wouldn't give the blood demon half-saint any time to breathe, Jialong obviously didn't plan to give Bing Yun much time to recover. After he appeared, he immediately urged the boundless corpse chi to fill the entire life and death platform. Bing Yun swung her long sword, and sword halos swept around. A cold aura filled the air, blocking the spread of the corpse chi. Jialong sneered and raised his hand. From the corpse chi, figures appeared one after another, each exuding a powerful aura. Seeing this, Bing Yun's expression became serious. She reached out and wiped the long sword with her fingers. Blood flowed out, and the sword hummed. The sword swept out like a waterfall. The refined corpses were cut in half, but under the nourishment of the corpse chi, they quickly healed and stood up again. They continued to attack Bing Yun. Jialong hid in the corpse chi, and his figure was erratic. Powerful secret techniques covered Bing Yun from time to time. Ice law filled the air, and snowflakes fell from the sky. When the snowflakes fell on the refined corpses, they immediately turned into hexagonal ice crystals. They quickly spread and froze the refined corpses into ice sculptures. However, there were still 2 refined corpses that were not affected. These 2 refined corpses were refined from half-saint corpses. They were the most powerful refined corpses under Jialong. Each of them seemed to have retained a little of their strength from when they were alive. They attacked from left and right, assisting Jialong in harassing Bing Yin. In comparison, Bing Yin had only been promoted to false emperor for a few years, while Jialong was a veteran half-saint in the demon territory. He was also the strongest under demon saint. There was a gap in their strength. Now that Jialong had the help of refined corpses, how could Bing Yin be his opponent? After a few dozen breaths of time, Bing Yin's breathing became a little chaotic. She was careless and was hit by Jialong's palm. A cracking sound came from her shoulder, and she was sent flying. On the life and death arena, Bing Yin and Jialong were fighting to the death. On the astral boundaries grandstand, Yang Kai used all his means to bombard the light screen. At first, he was the only one, but Yang Yin soon joined in. Then, Sheng Yuzhu also joined in. However, even with the combined strength of the 3, they could not shake the light screen at all. A person next to him sighed and said, "Please stop. This restriction is not something we can break. We have already tried before. If we don't fight to the death over there, I'm afraid we can't get out." Yang Kai turned a deaf ear. Anger burned in his heart, and his attacks became more and more fierce. The wanton energy made many false emperors' expressions change. On the life and death arena, Bing Yin's exclamation came again. She was hit by Jialong's divine technique again. A dark green light appeared on her originally pale face. It was obvious that the corpse poison had invaded her body. Yang Kai turned his head and saw Bing Yin desperately trying to escape. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. According to the situation, Bing Yin would most likely die in less than half a cup of tea's time. At that time, all he could do was collect Bing Yin's corpse. His heart was burning with anxiety. What could he do to help Bing Yin resolve this calamity? Not to mention that the restriction on the grandstand was so tough that they couldn't break it. Even if they broke it, what could they do? There was another layer of restriction on the life and death arena. If they couldn't solve this problem in half a cup of tea's time, they wouldn't be able to save Bing Yin. Suddenly, Yang Kai seemed to think of something, and turned his head to look at the Heaven Void Cauldron. In the Heaven Void Cauldron, the source heavenly fruit on the small tree was slightly swaying like a living creature. Light flowed inside as if it was about to ripen. When Lin Rusong died, the source heavenly fruit had already undergone some changes. When the blood demon half-saint died, the source heavenly fruit had undergone some changes again. As long as one more person died here, the source heavenly fruit should be completely ripe. As long as one more person died, the person who died might not necessarily be Bing Yin. Thinking of this, Yang Kai suddenly became enlightened. He secretly transmitted a message to Yang Yen, and fiercely circulated his demonic qi. Yang Yen, who was casting spells to attack the restriction, was startled for a moment before her beautiful eyes lit up. She nodded imperceptibly, and abruptly turned around. The 3 rings on her wrist turned into 3 flames, and shot towards one person. She shouted in a low voice, "Song Emo killed Feng Wuliang while escaping. He's heartless, despicable, and shameless. The heavenly Tao will not tolerate him." At the same time, Yang Kai also abruptly turned around. His spirit power swept out like a tsunami. The golden vertical pupil in his left eye appeared and met Song Mo's eyes. The black dragon spear in his hand fiercely stabbed out. On the tip of the spear, a fist-sized black dot exuded an aura that could devour all things. Chapter 3788. Everything happened so quickly that no one was able to react. Even Song Emo himself was still waiting to watch a good show, coldly watching Yang Kai, Yang Yen, and the others bombarding the barrier. But who would have thought that in the next moment, they would all turn their spears against him? Caught off guard, he was affected by Yang Kai's divine soul power, and his mind was in a trance. Fortunately, he had a good foundation and quickly reacted. With a roar, he punched out with both fists, which turned into a sky full of fist shadows. With a series of booming sounds, Yang Yan's 3 blazing flame rings were blown away. The 3 blazing flame rings flashed wildly and Yang Kai's figure also leaned back, taking a few steps back. On the black dragon spear, the black dot flashed and disappeared, collapsing a large area of the void. Song Yemo took advantage of the situation to fall back, his face pale. Yang Kai showed a surprised look, secretly thinking that this old dog's strength was really good. But in a hurry to withstand his and Yang Yan's 2 divine technique, he estimated that his current situation was not much better. However, before he could attack again, he heard a low voice coming from beside him. Yin Ru Shan Hua. A green figure flashed, and when it reappeared it was behind Song Yemo, blood dripping from the 2 curved blades in Sheng Yuju's hands. Song Yemo looked like he was struck by lightning, lowering his head to look at his chest and waist, each with a huge wound. Turning his head he cursed, "Bitch!" He had no enmity with Sheng Yuju, and had never even met her before. He really couldn't understand why this woman would attack him, and at such a critical moment, leaving him no chance to dodge or resist. "Thanks," Yang Kai shouted, and when he exhaled, the long spear leisurely retracted, and once again stretched out like a dragon coming out of the sea. Asterisk schwa schwa schwa. Asterisk with 3 whooshing sounds. Yang Yan's expression became solemn, his hands forming a series of seals, and the 3 blazing flame rings returned, turning into 3 shackles that covered Song Yemo unable to dodge. Song Yemo was directly tied up. Song Mo's face really changed this time. The scorching power of the 3 blazing flame rings had imprisoned his freedom and Emperor Qi. Seeing Yang Kai mercilessly thrusting his spear at him, Song Yemo roared, "Yang Kai, how dare you? I am from the Star Boundary, facing a great enemy. If you dare kill me, you will be committing a crime against the world." Yang Kai was unmoved, his voice cold. "When Master Feng was trapped by you, why didn't you think you were from the Star Boundary? Now you mention it, don't you think it's ridiculous?" As soon as his words fell, the black dragon spear, Song Yemo song his chest. Song Mo's body shook, and he glared angrily at Yang Kai. 10 meters away, Yang Kai looked back at him without any hesitation, his eyes cold and callous. In the stands there was silence. All the Star Boundary fake emperors looked at this sudden scene in horror, their minds unable to recover. From the time Yang Kai launched his attack until now, only 3 breaths had passed. It was so fast that no one could react. Before this, they were still watching the battle on the life and death stage, secretly worried about Bing Yun's safety. Who would have thought that Bing Yun was still alive, and Song Yemo, who was beside her, would be killed? It was not that Song Yemo was weak. He was able to cultivate to the fake emperor realm, because of his own good fortune. But in the stands, 3 people had attacked him, and all of them were sneak attacks. How could he block them? Not to mention his freedom was restricted by Yang Kai's 3 blazing flame rings. Not only were the stands on the Star Boundary's side silent, but even the stands on the Demon Territory's side were also silent. Many half-saint of demon race members stared at this side with wide eyes, all of them wearing inexplicable surprise. Drip drip. Blood dripped to the ground, splashing everywhere. Blood overflowed from the corners of Tsang Mo's mouth. He reached out and grabbed the black dragon spear, as if he wanted to hold on to his last bit of life. His eyes were full of resentment and regret as he said bitterly, "If I had known this would happen, if I had known this would happen, this king would have killed you in the lower Star Territory." Yang Kai tilted his head and looked at him. "This king can refine pills for regret. Do you want to buy one?" "Pooh." Song Yemo vomited blood. Yang Kai coldly snorted. "There is not much time left. For the sake of the Star Boundary, for the sake of the common people, please die." With a shake of his hand, demonic chi surged wildly, shattering Song Mo's meridians and annihilating his vitality. Song Mo's eyes were full of unwillingness, but the light quickly dissipated. Yang Kai pulled out his spear and swept his eyes around. Nearly 10 Star Boundary's false emperors frowned and looked at him with slight vigilance. Although they had heard some clues from Yang Kai and Yang Yan's words just now, no one knew whether what they said was true or false. However, since Song Yemo was dead now, no one would turn on Yang Kai and Yang Yen for a dead person. The necessary vigilance would not be lacking. Yang Kai also knew that his actions were very likely to alienate the false emperors, who were still alive in the star boundary. But this matter concerned Bing Yun's life and death, so he couldn't care less. At worst, he could explain it when he returned to the star boundary. He believed that with Yang Yen as a witness, the truth should be figured out soon. He glanced at Sheng Yuzhu again, and nodded slightly to her. This time, Sheng Yuzhu didn't ask anything and didn't say anything. When she saw Yang Kai take action, she immediately came to help. It was probably because she had been saved by Yang Kai before. And if it weren't for her, he and Yang Yen wouldn't have finished the battle so quickly. Under those circumstances, the longer the battle dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him and Yang Yen. Sensing his gaze, Sheng Yuzhu smiled slightly, then pointed to the side and said, "Get ready." Yang Kai's expression turned solemn, and he secretly urged his demonic qi. In the stands, Song Yemo fell to the ground, and his body quickly turned into a dried corpse. The patterns on the surface of the Heaven Void Cauldron, which had been slowly rotating, suddenly bloomed with dazzling light, and the aura of the great Tao flowed out. The source heavenly fruit on the small tree in the cauldron also changed inexplicably at this moment. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and purple constantly circulating. At a certain moment, it suddenly turned into a rainbow-colored light, illuminating the entire hall in a dazzling and colorful light. With a crash, something seemed to break. The light curtain that had been shrouding both sides of the stands suddenly collapsed and disappeared. At this moment, whether it was the star boundary's false emperors or the half-saint of demon race, their eyes became extremely fiery. Swish, swish, swish. Figures flew into the air and rushed straight towards the Heaven Void Cauldron. Their target was the ripened source heavenly fruit. When the light curtain shattered, Yang Kai's anxious heart finally relaxed. He knew that Jialong was right. They only needed 3 more people to die for the source heavenly fruit to completely ripen, and his plan to rescue Bing Yun would succeed. His figure flickered, and just as he was about to compete for the source heavenly fruit, he involuntarily glanced at the life and death stage. Yang Kai frowned. On the life and death stage, Bing Yun was not Jialong's opponent, and she had been dodging Jialong's divine technique attacks. However, when all the restrictions were broken and the source heavenly fruit ripened, she actually took the initiative to attack. A dazzling light swayed from her sword, turning into sword rings that enveloped Jialong. Looking at her posture, it seemed that she wanted to delay Jialong for a while. Jialong was furious. The greatest opportunity in the world was right in front of him. So how could he have the mood to fight with Bing Yun? He naturally wanted to snatch the source heavenly fruit as soon as possible. But Bing Yun was a fake emperor. If she really wanted to stop him, it would not be easy to get rid of her. In his rage, he opened his mouth and inhaled, causing his chest and abdomen to swell. He then spat out a mouthful of turbid corpse chi towards Bing Yun like a dragon emerging from the sea. He roared, "Scram!" Icy cold energy lingered around her body, but it couldn't stop the corpse chi from invading her body. Frozen Cloud was directly sent flying, spitting out a mouthful of blood in midair. Jialong ignored her and pounced towards the source heavenly fruit as fast as lightning. Just as Bing Yun was about to fall to the ground, a figure suddenly appeared behind her and supported her with one hand. He asked worriedly, "Senior, are you okay?" Bing Yun looked up and met Yang Kai's eyes. She couldn't help but feel anxious. "Don't worry about me, go." She took a blow from Jialong to stop him for a moment, in order to create an opportunity for the people in the star boundary. Who knew that Yang Kai would come for her? What was the point of her previous efforts? After saying this, Bing Yun's face turned even paler, almost draining of blood. Yang Kai also knew that time was of the essence. Seeing that Bing Yun's life was not in danger, he immediately put her into the sealed world bead with his divine sense, and handed her over to the 2 wood spirits. Not daring to stop, his figure flickered again, and disappeared in an instant. "Get out here!" Jialong's roar rang out. Yang Kai, who was shuttling through the void, only felt a huge force coming towards him. He was involuntarily shaken out of his body, and was still some distance away from the Heaven Void Cauldron. At this moment, Next to the heaven void cauldron, figures rushed forward one after another like cats that had smelled fish. They were all scrambling to fight for the greatest opportunity in the world. At this time, whether it was the false emperor or the half-saint, even though the intent to form the spirit array was still there, it was more for themselves. Everyone around them was their competitor. Next to the heaven void cauldron, a chaotic battle broke out again. Divine technique after divine technique was used, one after another, dazzling like a flower. However, at this final juncture of the battle for the great Tao, everyone became extremely careful. No one wanted to be easily injured at this time, so no one used their full strength, leaving a large part of their mind to protect themselves. The scene looked extremely fierce, but the cruelty of the battle was far from what it was at the beginning. Everyone was holding back, only preparing to snatch the source heavenly fruit. Unfortunately, under the obstruction of each other, no one could get within 10 meters of the heaven void cauldron. Anyone who had the opportunity would be blocked by the enemy. In terms of the number of people who entered the profound heaven temple, the demon territory had an absolute advantage. Although this advantage was not as great as it was at the beginning, the demon territory still had 4 or 5 half-saint realm cultivators, more than the false emperors from the star boundary. And these 4 or 5 half-saint realm cultivators were the key to determining the outcome. As time passed, the half-saint of demon race gradually gained the upper hand. They formed a triangle and slowly approached the heaven void cauldron, while the false emperors from the star boundary were blocked outside. For a moment, everyone was anxious. Chapter 3789. Yang Kai's repeated attempts to use the law of space to approach the heaven void cauldron were all repelled by Jialong, causing his expression to turn ugly. Although Jialong was not proficient in the Tao of space, the heaven void cauldron was right there. If Yang Kai wanted to seize the heavenly source fruit, he would have to get close to the heaven void cauldron, so he only needed to exert pressure from the surroundings. The astral boundary's fake emperors could not break through the half-saint's defensive circle, so they could forget about getting close to the heavenly source fruit. At this critical moment, the extra people from the demon race became the key to victory. Time passed and the battle continued. The fake emperors could only watch helplessly as the half-saint slowly approached the heaven void cauldron. Finally, when the heaven void cauldron was within reach, Jialong shouted, "Stop them!" Then he turned around and rushed towards the heaven void cauldron. He opened his hand and grabbed the heavenly source fruit, his eyes blazing. As long as he could seize the heavenly source fruit, he would win the final victory. Not only would he make the astral boundary lose everything, but he would also give the demon race another demon saint. At that time, the astral boundary would no longer be able to resist. At this moment, a person's low voice suddenly sounded, "Heaven. Crushing strike." A terrifying divine sense spread out, and the invisible spirit attack turned into a short spear that was visible to the naked eye and shot straight towards Jialong's head. Yang Kai's eyes widened as he turned his head to look at the person who spoke. He saw a middle-aged man smiling at him with a sly look in his eyes. Yang Kai knew this middle-aged man, but he was not familiar with him. He was one of the demon heavenly path's 4 great dark lords, Fire Lord. When he entered the profound heaven palace, Yang Kai had paid special attention to this person. After all, he was the only human in the demon race's camp. He was like a crane in a flock of chickens, so it was difficult not to pay attention to him. In profound heavenly temple's world-sealed world, Yang Kai had not met the other party, nor had he had any dealings with them. In the chaotic battle just now, they had fought a few times, but since everyone had been holding back, Yang Kai had not been able to determine the other party's depths. Who would have thought that he would suddenly launch an attack, and the target of his attack was Jialong? This move was too surprising. Just like how Yang Kai suddenly attacked Song Mo, the demon race probably didn't expect that Fire Lord of the demonic path would actually have the guts to plot against the first half-saint of the demon race. Only Yang Kai's eyes lit up in surprise. If the Fire Lord hadn't said a word, he might not have understood what was going on. He would have guessed that the Fire Lord had ulterior motives and wanted to snatch the source heavenly fruit. However, when he heard the words heaven breaking strike, How could he not know what was going on? He also knew this soul secret technique, and the person who taught him this secret technique was Tianyan, whom he had met in the Divine Ascension Mirror in Azure Sun Temple. Tianyan was born from the Divine Ascension Mirror, and because he didn't have a physical body, his attainments in soul cultivation were extremely terrifying. The Divine Ascension Mirror was also a world, and Tianyan's attainments in soul cultivation had definitely reached the level of the great emperors. Later on, Yang Kai coincidentally obtained the flesh incarnation fruit and refined the flesh incarnation pill, which helped Tianyan form a physical body and break free from the shackles of the Divine Ascension Mirror, allowing him to appear in this world. However, when Tianyan's physical body had just been formed, his strength was low. Later on, he stayed in Azure Sun Temple for a while, and after he matured a little, he went out to wander the world. After that, there was no news of him. Yang Kai had also thought of inquiring about him, but the demon race had invaded, and the star boundary was in chaos, so he didn't have the energy to do so. He never expected that the senior who had been missing for so many years would actually appear right in front of him. Moreover, he had even become one of the 4 great demon envoys of the demon Heavenly Way and infiltrated Profound Heaven Temple, turning against him at the last moment. Yang Kai didn't know what Tianyan had experienced all these years to allow him to cultivate all the way to the false emperor realm from scratch. However, this wasn't strange. He originally had the foundation of the great emperors, but he didn't have a physical body. With Yang Kai's help, he was able to form a physical body, and all his comprehension of the martial Tao was there. As long as he cultivated step by step, his cultivation would naturally increase rapidly. He wasn't like other cultivators who were restricted by various bottlenecks. As for why his appearance had changed, it was probably because he had used some kind of secret technique. Tianyan's spirit cultivation was originally at the level of the great emperors. Even if there were many restrictions and he couldn't display his full strength, this attack couldn't be underestimated. The spirit spear visible to the naked eye blasted into Jialong's mind from behind while he was unprepared. Jialong's burly body suddenly froze in place, unable to move. His hand that was reaching for the source heavenly fruit was only a foot away from the 7-colored divine fruit. But it wasn't over yet. After Tianyan launched his attack, he didn't even look at Jialong. He clapped his hands together and suddenly pushed them to the sides. With him as the center, a huge ring of fire suddenly spread out. The ring of fire contained a scorching power. Caught off guard, many semi-sages of the demon race were thrown off their feet. The originally tight formation also exposed a huge flaw at this moment. What are you waiting for? Tianyan chuckled as he looked at the pleasantly surprised Yang Kai. Many thanks, senior. Yang Kai hurriedly said. His figure flickered as he rushed out through the gap Tianyan had torn open, arriving in front of the Heaven Void Cauldron in the blink of an eye. Bastard! It was only now that Jialong returned to his senses. He endured the heart-wrenching pain in his head as he clenched his hand into a fist and punched towards Yang Kai's waist. Yang Kai turned a deaf ear to Jialong's attack. The only thing in his eyes was the source heavenly fruit. The moment Jialong's fist was about to reach his body, he executed the Nihility secret technique and banished himself into the void. The punch filled with destructive power passed through Yang Kai's body. Although it didn't use its full power, the power that shook the void still made Yang Kai groan. Jialong's expression changed, but it was too late to stop him. When he turned his head, he saw that Yang Kai had already reached the small tree and grabbed the source heavenly fruit. He gently plucked it and put the 7-colored divine fruit into his pouch. Jialong went crazy and pounced towards Yang Kai with a furious roar. Yang Kai waited with rapt attention. He knew that it was time to decide life and death. Previously, everyone had held back because they wanted to snatch the source heavenly fruit. But now that the source heavenly fruit had been taken away by him, how could the mini half-saint in the demon territory be willing to accept this? From the standpoint of the demon race, they couldn't let Yang Kai take the source heavenly fruit away, even if they had to risk their lives. A storm of attacks rained down on Yang Kai from all directions. The joint attack of more than a dozen half-saint made Yang Kai's expression turn incomparably solemn. However, at that moment, with a rumbling sound, a transparent light curtain appeared around the heaven void cauldron, blocking all the attacks before they could reach Yang Kai. Yang Kai was stunned, Jialong was stunned, and all the half-saint and fake emperors were stunned. The hall was silent as everyone stared at Yang Kai, who was hiding on the small tree in the heaven void cauldron, with different expressions. Ha 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 ha. Yang Kai couldn't help laughing. His tense mind completely relaxed. He didn't expect that the mysterious heaven palace would have such a protective restriction after snatching the source heavenly fruit. Although he was happy, he also felt a trace of fear. Fortunately, Senior Tianyan had acted in time. Otherwise, if Jia Long had snatched the source heavenly fruit, he would be the one standing outside worrying. Laughter echoed in the spacious hall. The faces of the many half-saint in the demon territory were extremely ugly. Although the many fake emperors were unwilling, the result was still acceptable. Originally, everyone's bottom line was that they couldn't let the demon race obtain the opportunity. Although they weren't the ones who had the last laugh, Yang Kai was still a member of the star boundary. Yang Yin let out a long sigh. He recalled Li Wui's instructions before they set off, and felt a sense of relief. Li Wui's sacrifice, and the death of nearly 20 fake emperors hadn't been in vain. In the end, Yang Kai, who was only a high-grade demon king, had achieved the lifelong dream of an entire generation. Yang Yin was gratified. He turned his head to look at Sheng Yuzhu, and found that after hesitating for a while, she seemed to have let go of something and smiled. After a while, Yang Kai stopped laughing and coldly stared at Jialong, who was standing a few feet away from him. He tossed the source heavenly fruit in his hand and said in a cold voice, "When this king refines this fruit, I'll kill you all one by one." Jialong's eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and the veins on his forehead throbbed. Looking at Yang Kai, who seemed to be within reach, he truly understood what it meant to be so close yet so far. With the existence of that restriction, he couldn't do anything to Yang Kai no matter what, and Yang Kai's words made him feel a sense of crisis. This little bastard's strength couldn't be underestimated. If he really refined the source heavenly fruit, how strong would he become? At that time, would a half-saint be his match? After Yang Kai finished speaking, he really opened his mouth and stuffed the source heavenly fruit into it, and began chewing. His eyes were still glaring at Jialong, as if he was about to teach him a lesson. Jialong's expression changed. At this moment, no matter how unwilling he was, it was useless. Yang Kai had already eaten the source heavenly fruit. How could he make him spit it out? Moreover, if he continued to delay here, he wouldn't be able to leave after refining the source heavenly fruit. Thinking of this, Jialong thought of retreating and shouted, "Let's go!" Then, he led the dozen or so half-saint of demon race to slowly retreat. A trace of hesitation flashed across the faces of the fake emperors. But in the end, they didn't stop him. Now that the dust had settled, and the number of people on both sides was about the same, it wouldn't be good for anyone to continue arguing. It was better to wait until Yang Kai refined the source heavenly fruit, and his strength soared. It wouldn't be too late to deal with them then. On Yang Kai's side, the source heavenly fruit melted into a sweet liquid the moment it entered his mouth, and flowed down his throat into his stomach. A warm feeling instantly spread throughout his body, causing his tense nerves to relax involuntarily, and even make him feel drowsy. At the same time, various mysterious principles flashed across Yang Kai's knowledge sea, allowing him to gain insight into many mysteries. The mysterious Tian Hall is about to close. Forcing himself to maintain his consciousness, Yang Kai looked at the people in front of him. He didn't know why he knew all of this, but somehow, he was able to see the situation inside profound heavenly temple down to the smallest detail. Everyone was startled by this news, but they soon calmed down. Now that the source heavenly fruit had been swallowed by Yang Kai, there was no need for the mysterious Tian Hall to exist. It was only natural for it to close. Chapter 3790. There's no need to panic. When this world-sealed world closes, everyone will withdraw safely. As for me, I may have to stay here for a while, so I'll leave everything in the outside world to you. Yang Kai cupped his fists. Everyone returned the gesture, and Yang Yin said, "Focus on refining the source heavenly fruit. You don't have to worry about the outside world." Yang Kai nodded. It was useless for him to worry about the outside world, since the world had given him a chance to survive, and he had firmly grasped it. What he needed to do was to do his best to refine the source heavenly fruit, so that he wouldn't disappoint the world. This senior Tian Yin is one of us. Azure Sun Temple's temple master knows his origins. Yang Kai pointed to Tian Yin again. Yang Yin turned his head and smiled at Tian Yin. Although Tian Yin had previously played the role of Fire Lord of the Demon Sky Path, his betrayal at the last moment was enough to prove his position. In that situation, he could have rushed into the Heaven Void Cauldron and fought for the source heavenly fruit, but he didn't do so. Instead, after attacking Jiaolong, he dealt with the other half-saint of demon race, creating an opening for Yang Kai and creating a final opportunity. Therefore, at this moment, the many false emperors in the star boundary didn't have much hostility towards him. In fact, they didn't even have much vigilance against him. "Senior, I will never forget this kindness. I will thank you again after I come out of seclusion." Yang Kai cupped his fists towards Tian Yin. Tian Yin chuckled. "There's no need for that. Although the divine fruit is amazing, it isn't of much use to me, since it has become your opportunity. This old master's many years of concealment have not been in vain." Yang Kai was taken aback, and immediately understood that he had the foundation of the great emperors. Although others coveted the source heavenly fruit, it really wasn't of much use to him. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly frowned and said, "Time's up. Everyone, let's part ways here. I hope that the days ahead will be peaceful, and we will have a good time drinking and chatting." As soon as he finished speaking, a buzzing sound suddenly resounded throughout the hall. Then, everyone felt a repulsive force pressing down on them from all directions. That repulsive force was so strong that no one could resist it. In just a short span of 3 breaths, it suddenly disappeared. Looking at the empty hall, Yang Kai's dizziness grew stronger. He sat down cross-legged, closed his eyes, and immersed his mind completely. In the star boundary, high up in the sky, a majestic and unadorned hall was suspended in midair. Among the billions of creatures in the star boundary, anyone could clearly see the outline of the hall as long as they raised their heads. It had been over a month since the Battle of the Grand Tao had begun, and the situation in the star dimension had become more and more precarious during this period. The demon race had set up a shocking spirit array, and the demon land, with the 108 demon dens of various sizes as its center, was constantly expanding. Every moment, large tracts of land in the 4 territories of the star boundary were being eroded by demon intent. As time passed, this speed became faster and faster. The space for the human race to move in the star boundary was constantly being compressed, and the various armies retreated again and again until there was no place to retreat. The entire Western territory was now completely eroded, and the situation in the Eastern, Southern, and Northern territories was not much better. Now the human race's territory was less than 1/10 of its original size. It was likely that in less than half a month, the star boundary would completely fall. At that time, the star boundary would cease to exist, and when the nest was overturned, no eggs would remain intact. At that time, all the human race would likely become demons. The 2 great elders of the dragon race had repeatedly attacked, but the effect was minimal. Even though Zhu Yan and Fu Tianyi's strength had greatly increased, and the husband and wife could suppress the 3 demon saints' joint forces, they could not stop the erosion and expansion of the demon land. Li Wuyi's hair had turned white. As the chief commander of the various armies in the star boundary, the pressure he was under was greater than anyone else. Before the Battle of the Grand Tao, he had asked all the fake emperors who participated to leave behind their life lamps. If they were alive, their life lamps would remain. If they were dead, their life lamps would extinguish. Over the past few days, he had watched as the 30 life lamps in his hand went out one by one, and his heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. At this point, he only had 11 life lanterns that were still lit. In other words, of the people who entered the profound heaven temple, only 11 had survived. He had heard that the Battle of the Grand Tao was incomparably cruel, and that only a third of the people who entered could return alive. Now it seemed that this was not a lie. The only thing that made him feel fortunate was that Yang Kai's life lamp was still shining, as well as Yang Inflammation's and Bing Yun's. As long as the three of them were fine, there was always a glimmer of hope. Spirit Beast Island in the Eastern Territory, which was originally the Martial Beast Territory, had now been occupied by the various armies of the Star Boundary, and the island was full of human race soldiers. In the main hall, the commanders of the various armies were gathered together, with Li Wuyi at the head of the table. He glanced around and saw that everyone's expression was extremely solemn and gloomy. Today, they were gathered here to discuss the matter of retreat. The Western Territory had completely fallen, and the next three territories would be the Eastern, Southern, and Northern Territories. The difference was only a matter of time. Even so, the Star Boundary still had to make a final effort. After pondering for a while, Li Wuyi said, "We can no longer stay in the Eastern Territory. From the intelligence gathered from all over the world, I'm afraid that in less than 10 days, the Eastern Territory will follow in the footsteps of the Western Territory. At that time, even Spirit Beast Island will not be spared. How is the situation in the Southern Territory?" While speaking, Li Wuyi turned his head and looked at Wen Zishan. Wen Zishan stood up and cupped his fists, a solemn expression on his face. "Compared to the Eastern Territory, it's even worse. We can only hold on for a shorter time, 5 days at most." Hearing this, Li Wuyi frowned and looked at someone else. "What about the Northern Territory?" Jiahai Army Commander Pan Gungnian stood up and said, "The situation in the Northern Territory is better, but it shouldn't be able to hold on for long, but what?" Li Wuyi raised his eyebrows. "The other territories in the Northern Territory are fine, but the situation in the High Heaven Palace is not bad. When the demon land expanded to 1,000 miles away from the High Heaven Palace, its speed dropped sharply and became extremely slow. In this old man's opinion, the High Heaven Palace can hold on for at least a month." The High Heaven Palace, Li Wuyi pondered. The protection of the world force. There was no reason for the High Heaven Palace to be different from other places, so the only explanation was Yang Kai. The High Heaven Palace was single-handedly built by Yang Kai, and this great sect carried his tremendous efforts. Before that, Yang Kai still had a trace of the world will on him, so it made sense to say that this was the last protection of the world force. "So, we can only evacuate to the High Heaven Palace?" Ma Qing stroked his goatee. "That's just drinking poison to quench thirst. What can we do in a month? Are we going to wait for death in the High Heaven Palace?" The person who spoke looked up at Li Wuyi and said, "Chief Army Master, what's the situation in Dragon Island? If we evacuate to Dragon Island..." Dragon Island was a small isolated world, and its territory was vast, so it could accommodate a lot of people. With the current situation of the various legions in the astral boundary, even if all of them were to evacuate to Dragon Island, there should be more than enough space to spare. As for the humans who were not in the various legions, they could only pray for their own good. Li Wuyi slowly shook his head. "The expansion of the demon land is due to the erosion of the demon will in the demon territory. Although Dragon Island is a small isolated world, it is also attached to the astral boundary. If the astral boundary is eroded, the small isolated world will naturally not be able to survive. Hiding in Dragon Island is not a good idea. It will only give the demon race an opportunity to catch a turtle in a jar. When that time comes, our situation will only be more passive." After pondering for a moment, a trace of determination flashed in Li Wuyi's eyes. "Notify the entire army that within 3 days, we will evacuate to the High Heaven Palace in the Northern Territory. Order all legions." At this point, the world suddenly trembled, interrupting him. Immediately after, a mysterious aura suddenly surged and swept through every corner of the star boundary. All the powerhouses who sensed this aura revealed thoughtful expressions at this moment, as if they had gained something from it. Li Wuyi was slightly startled, but then, as if thinking of something, his figure flickered, and he quickly rushed out of the hall. Seeing him like this, the others naturally hurriedly followed. When they arrived outside the hall, they saw Li Wuyi looking up, and when they followed his gaze, their eyes instantly widened. In the sky, the profound heaven palace, which had been silent all this time, suddenly twisted and changed, quickly changing into the appearance of a simple giant cauldron. The giant cauldron flickered with light, and many strange patterns were engraved around it. The patterns floated and sank, and one name after another flashed. From these names, everyone saw many familiar and unfamiliar words. Xian Yuan, True Martial, Golden Cicada Rakshasa Flowing Time Great Emperor, Heaven Devouring Great Emperor, Rushing Sky, Iron Blood, Red Dust, Blue Sea, Blue Lotus, Ice Feather, Wondrous Pill, Heaven's Revelations, Beast Warrior. Leave your name on the Great Tao. Li Wuyi shouted in a low voice, his eyes burning with passion. The names of the great emperors were not self-imposed, nor were they passed down by the world, but were bestowed by the heavenly Tao. Every name of the great emperors coincided with their own great Tao, a great Tao recognized by the world. Only by leaving their name on the great Tao of heaven and earth could they become great emperors revered by the world. The familiar and unfamiliar words were undoubtedly the titles of the many great emperors of the star boundary. The titles of the 10 great emperors of the most recent generation were among them, not missing a single one. Even Qin Ye's name, Yi Ying, could be clearly seen. The colors of the characters flashing on the giant cauldron also seemed to be different. Although they were all golden in color, the older they were, the darker they became. Comparatively speaking, the words of the 10 great emperors of the most recent generation were the brightest in color. Is this the end? Li Wuyi's lips suddenly became dry as he stared at the giant cauldron, trying to find a new title from it. The profound heaven palace had not changed since its appearance, but now that it had suddenly turned into a giant cauldron, and the titles of the great emperors of the past were constantly appearing, there was no doubt that there had been new developments in the great Tao struggle, and it was very likely that it had already ended. What was the situation in the star boundary? Who would obtain the great Tao opportunity in the end? This was what Li Wuyi was most concerned about right now. If the star boundary obtained the great Tao opportunity, then the crisis in the star boundary would most likely change. But if the demon race succeeded, then the star boundary would really be in danger. No prize quiz. What title will Yang Kai leave on the Heaven Void Cauldron? Chapter 3791. His eyes swept across the giant cauldron, but to Li Wuyi's disappointment, he couldn't find a new title. Did I fail? Even someone as calm as Li Wuyi, who could remain calm in the face of a demon saint, couldn't help but stagger at this moment, his face turning pale. The many corps commanders around him were also discussing spiritedly, their emotions flowing through the crowd. Wang. With a soft sound, a jade slip appeared in front of Li Wuyi out of thin air. Li Wuyi's expression brightened as he grabbed it, and immersed his consciousness into it. After a moment of daze, a smile appeared on his face. At first, the smile was not obvious, but it soon widened and his laughter shook the world. Everyone turned their heads and stared at Li Wuyi, and the jade slip in his hand. From the jade slip, they could feel the aura of yang inflammation. In other words, this jade slip was sent by yang inflammation, and yang inflammation was one of the candidates to participate in the great Tao struggle. The fact that he sent this message at this time undoubtedly meant that the great Tao struggle was indeed over. Judging from the happy look on Li Wuyi's face and his carefree laughter, everyone's spirits were lifted and the anxiety in their hearts was replaced by great surprise. Although they had some guesses, they didn't dare to be too sure until Li Wuyi confirmed it, lest the truth be false. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. General Master, could it be that the great Tao opportunity has finally fallen into the hands of Star Boundary? An old man's beard trembled as he couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart, an abnormal red flush appearing on his withered old face. General Master, what's the situation? Why don't you tell us first before you laugh? Li Wuyi, however, couldn't stop laughing. He laughed so hard that tears came out of his eyes, leaving everyone quite speechless. Since they knew him, no one had ever seen him lose his composure like this. The pressure he had been under recently was simply too great. As the general commander of Star Boundary, he didn't dare to say that he was responsible for the survival of Star Boundary. But any decision he made was related to the future of hundreds of millions of lives and the continuation of an entire race. All he could do was stall for time as much as possible and preserve the strength of Star Boundary for any changes in the future. For this reason, he did not hesitate to give up the opportunity to enter the profound Heaven Palace and participate in the battle of the Great Tao. He gave up his life's pursuit. But now, this glimmer of hope had finally appeared. His tense state of mind relaxed a lot at this moment. After a long while, Li Wui finally restrained his smile. His gaze swept across the faces of the fake emperors one by one. And then he said in a deep voice, "The opportunity of the Great Tao has been obtained by our Star Boundary." As soon as he said this, everyone's breathing quickened. Although they had guessed this before, they didn't dare to believe it until Li Wui personally admitted it. "Who is it?" the elderly man asked in a trembling voice. After all, this was the key to becoming great emperors. The person who had seized the opportunity of the Great Path was very likely to be the future great emperors of the astral boundary. How could he not ask clearly? "Yang Kai," Li Wui replied with a smile. A burst of exclamations rang out, and everyone couldn't help but look at each other. Although Yang Kai's performance when he returned from the demon territory this time was amazing, no one had thought that this candidate would actually be him. After all, his cultivation was there for all to see. Previously, when Li Wui gave up his spot to Yang Kai, to be honest, many people felt uncomfortable in their hearts. Although the path of martial Tao wasn't necessarily based on seniority, Yang Kai's cultivation was low, and his qualifications were shallow. Even if Li Wui really wanted to give up his spot, it wouldn't be his turn to enter the profound Heaven Palace. Before this, everyone felt that it was a waste for Yang Kai to enter the profound Heaven Palace. If his cultivation wasn't at the false emperor realm, what could he do there? Just come out and do nothing? So when Li Wui said the words Yang Kai, no one expected that the final result of the Battle of the Great Tao would actually be such a situation. A guy who wasn't even a false emperor realm cultivator would actually come out on top. For a moment, everyone couldn't help but feel a little absent-minded. When they thought of Li Wui's decision at that time, they actually felt that he had great foresight. Li Wui's face was also filled with pride. He had stood his ground against all opposition and allowed Yang Kai to occupy a precious spot to enter the profound Heaven Palace. This had put him under a lot of pressure, and if it weren't for his position as the general commander, he would have been questioned long ago. Fortunately, Yang Kai didn't disappoint in the end. "Is it really Yang Kai?" someone asked in disbelief. "What's the specific situation? How are the casualties in the Star Boundary?" Questions were asked one after another, and everyone looked eagerly at Li Wui. Before Li Wui could answer, a series of swishing sounds rang out, and a number of figures suddenly appeared beside Li Wui. Everyone looked over and couldn't help but narrow their eyes, because these figures were all candidates to enter the profound Heaven Palace this time. However, at this moment, almost all of them were injured, and almost none of them were unharmed. Those who were seriously injured even had weak auras and were covered in blood. And there were only about 10 people who appeared here. Yang Yan was the leader, and when she appeared, she only felt pairs of fiery eyes staring at her. She quickly figured out what was going on and smiled, cupping her fists at Li Wui. "I didn't let you down." As soon as she came out of the profound Heaven Palace, she immediately sent a message to Li Wui to inform him of the results of the Battle of the Great Taos. And then she activated the Space Spirit Bead to come here. Li Wui nodded. "Thank you for your hard work." He then looked at the people behind her, and a trace of sadness flashed across his face. He cupped his fists and said, "Thank you for your hard work, everyone." Everyone returned the gesture. Li Wui looked at Yang Yan and asked, "Is that all?" Although he controlled everyone's life lamps and knew how many people had died in the profound Heaven Palace from the flickering of their life lamps, how could he be reconciled if he didn't get to the bottom of this? Yang Yan nodded sadly. Bing Yin is also in Yang Kai's small sealed world. She will come out with Yang Kai. Li Wui sighed. In the Battle of the Great Taos, Only 3 out of 10 will survive. Haha, the heavenly way is heartless. The group of fake emperors who stayed in the star boundary were also pale at this moment. After the Battle of the Great Daos ended, only about 10 of them returned. Even if Yang Kai and Bing Yun were included, there were only a dozen or so. However, more than 30 of them entered. In just over a month, the star boundary's casualties were so heavy. Over the years, the Battle of the Two Realms had never caused such heavy casualties to the star boundary's fake emperors. Moreover, among the 10 who returned, there was one who was very noteworthy. Li Wui stared at Tianyin for a while, and was slightly surprised. Fire Lord. From the looks of it, this Fire Lord of the demonic heavenly path was not captured, but he had strangely appeared with the fake emperors of the star boundary. Furthermore, they were coexisting peacefully. It seemed that something had happened in the profound heaven palace. Yang Yin said, "This is Master Tianyin. At the last moment of the Battle of the Great Daos, it was thanks to him that the demon race's plan was foiled, allowing Yang Kai to seize the initiative. He is one of us." Li Wuyi's expression changed slightly, but he did not ask in detail. Instead he asked, "How are the losses on the demon race's side?" Yang Yin smiled bitterly. "Not any less than us. There are no more than 15 of them who are still alive." There was a burst of gasps. There were 40 people from the half-saint of demon race, and less than 15 of them survived in the end. The casualty rate was basically the same as the star boundary's side. Looking at it this way, the star boundary's losses were not unacceptable. Next, under the questioning of everyone, Yang Yin and the others briefly recounted their encounters in the profound heaven palace. Everyone yearned for the mysteries of that secret realm of heaven and earth, but the dangers that were brewing everywhere and the desperate battle at the last moment were also very frightening. They could not help but wonder, if they had entered the profound heaven palace, would they have been part of the survivors? After learning that Tianyin had plotted against Jialong at the last moment and caused Jialong's efforts to fail, everyone's expression softened. Wen Zishan also testified to Tianyin's origins at this time, which made everyone admire him even more. One had to know that the demonic heavenly path was a faction that Qin Yi had founded back then. Tianyin had been able to successfully infiltrate it and become one of the 4 great lords without being seen through. He had even concealed himself until the time of the Great Dao battle, before delivering a fatal blow to the devil race. It could be said that he had put in a lot of effort. If it were someone else, even Li Wuyi would not have been able to do this. Yang Kai swallowed the source empyrean fruit and said that he may have to stay in the profound heaven palace for a while. Yang Yin added. Li Wuyi nodded and said, "It gathers the fortune of dozens of fake emperors and half-saint realm demon territory. It will not be easy to refine such a divine fruit." After pondering for a while, he said, "All of you go and rest. There may be a tough battle before Yang Kai comes out of seclusion." Yang Yin and the others quickly left. Although they had gained a lot from participating in the Battle of the Great Daos, they really needed a good rest. Li Wuyi's loud voice rang out. "Pass down my order. All legions gather their men and bring their supplies. Evacuate Spirit Beast Island and head to the Northern Territory, High Heaven Palace. That would be the last pure land of the star boundary. If the High Heaven Palace fell, the star boundary would not be far from destruction." Many legion commanders received the order and left. Orders were passed down layer by layer, and the soldiers gathered on Spirit Beast Island were soon ready to go. The space array continued to operate, and rays of light flashed incessantly. After 3 days, when Li Wuyi evacuated from Spirit Beast Island, the entire island was empty. Mo Shaoqi's eyes were red and swollen, as she looked at the home she had lived in since childhood with reluctance, and said with a choked voice, "Uncle Li, will we come back?" Li Wuyi patted her head. "We will definitely come back." With a flash of light, Li Wuyi and Mo Shaoqi's figures also disappeared from the space array. A moment later, the space array cracked and turned into a pile of dust. 2 days later, the Southern Territory fell. The entire Southern Territory was invaded by the Demon Land. In the Demon Land's territory, the flowers and trees withered, and it was dead silent, as if even the vitality of the world had been taken away. Another 4 days later, the Eastern Territory fell. On the day the Eastern Territory fell, Yang Xiao was ordered to quietly return to Dragon Island to observe the changes in the small world where Dragon Island was located. He soon reported that the small world where Dragon Island was located was not spared. Demon intent invaded Dragon Island through the Void Gate, and the originally beautiful scenery turned into a dead silence in an instant. Chapter 3792. In the vast astral realm, only the area within a radius of 1,000 miles around the High Heaven Palace in the Northern Territory had not been eroded. All the armies in the astral realm had gathered here, and the 2 great elders of the dragon race were personally overseeing it. This place would be the final battlefield of the final battle between the humans and demons. If they won, they would have a chance to catch their breath. If they lost, they would be doomed eternally. Since the start of the battle between the 2 realms, the billions of lives in the astral realm had been lost. In the Eastern, Southern, Western, and Western Territory, humans could be seen everywhere. They had been eroded by the demon will, lost their minds, and only knew how to kill. Although the High Heaven Palace was large, it could not accommodate so many people. Now that all the armies in the astral realm had gathered, it was almost overcrowded. Because of this, many soldiers had no choice but to stay in the One Realm bead all day. The One Realm bead that Yang Kai had refined was also stuffed to the brim. Perhaps it was the final protection of the will of heaven and earth. After the demon will had eroded the Eastern, Southern, Western Territory, and most of the Northern Territory, it finally met with resistance in the area within a radius of 1,000 miles around the High Heaven Palace. The speed of the erosion was extremely slow, and in the end, it could not advance even an inch. Somehow, there seemed to be some power around the High Heaven Palace that blocked the erosion of the demon will, leaving the last place for the humans in the astral realm to stand. Now that the entire astral realm had been taken in, whether it was the demon saint or the half-saint below, they could not tolerate the special existence of the High Heaven Palace. Only by eroding the High Heaven Palace could the great plan of the demon race be completed. Perhaps there was also a sense of crisis from losing the battle. Therefore, 10 days after the battle ended, and 3 days after the Eastern Territory had fallen, the demon race army attacked. The demon race from the various demon dens came out in full force. They rushed over from all directions and surrounded the High Heaven Palace. Without any pleasantries, they directly launched an all-out attack. The first to attack the High Heaven Palace was not the demon race's army, but the humans who had been eroded by the demonic will and turned into demons. The number of these demons was 10 times, or even 100 times larger than the demon race's main army. They could be found almost everywhere in the 4 territories of the astral boundary. The demon race's army only needed to capture and drive them away to form a huge camp. Under the influence of the demon race, the confused demon race, who only knew how to kill, fearlessly rushed towards the High Heaven Palace. The strength of these demons was generally not high. Any soldier of the Star Boundaries army could kill a large number of them, but there were too many of them. Outside the High Heaven Palace, a fierce battle began. Facing his former compatriots, Li Wui could only harden his heart and give the order to annihilate them. In just 3 days, tens of millions of demon dwellers had died outside Lingxiao Palace. Blood flowed like a river within 1,000 li, and corpses piled up layer after layer. With the deaths of these demons, the demonic qi in their bodies leaked out and finally infected the land that was originally protected by the heavens and earth. Outside the High Heaven Palace, the demon land once again pushed forward. Although the speed was not fast, if this continued, the High Heaven Palace would not be able to survive one day. Zhu Yan and Fu Xiu were furious. They brazenly rushed out of the High Heaven Palace and headed straight for the demon race's army. Although they displayed their might, they were stopped by Xueli, Fu Yu, and Huobu in time. The demon race suffered many casualties in this battle, but it did not affect the overall situation. More white hair grew on Li Wui's head. Every day, He would raise his head countless times to look at the heaven-void cauldron in the sky. He looked at the constantly flashing words around the giant cauldron, and secretly prayed that Yang Kai would return as soon as possible. 10 days after the start of the final battle, the demon land advanced 500 kilometers outside the High Heaven Palace. 5 days later, they advanced another 300 kilometers. Outside the High Heaven Palace, only 200 kilometers had not been invaded by the demon land. As time passed, the demon race's attacks grew fiercer and fiercer, and the star boundary was somewhat exhausted. Despair spread among the various armies, and under the heavy pressure, many people's willpower was on the verge of collapse. All kinds of chaos played out in the High Heaven Palace. With external troubles and internal troubles, many experts were badly battered. While the battle was in full swing, inside the heaven-void cauldron in the profound Heaven Palace, under the divine tree, Yang Kai seemed to be sleeping. After swallowing the source heavenly fruit, he felt drowsy and couldn't resist the drowsiness at all. He barely managed to say a few words to Yang Yan and the others before he directly fell asleep. His mind was empty and his body felt numb. It was as if he had returned to his mother's belly. A feeling of peace enveloped him as a new life was being born. At a certain moment, his consciousness became clear for a moment, and he couldn't help but think about his own Tao. If he hadn't experienced the Tao heart before, Yang Kai might not have known what he wanted. But after that strange experience, Yang Kai was very clear on what he should do. He should search for his own Tao, the Tao that was recognized by the heavens and earth. And his Tao was the Tao of space. Bits and pieces of the past lingered in his mind, and bit by bit, his understanding of the Tao of space emerged. He thought back to when he first saw the Tao of space, then to when he reached the minor accomplishment stage, then to when he finally reached the next level layer by layer. Yang Kai's understanding of his Tao became increasingly clear. The void trembled as tiny cracks appeared in the surrounding space, slithering about like spirit snakes. His demonic qi and spiritual energy were rapidly shrinking towards a certain point in his body, faintly showing signs of turning into a mysterious mark. A Tao seal. Although no one had ever told him this before, Yang Kai quickly understood his own situation when he experienced this process himself. Gather one's essence, qi and spirit, one's lifetime of comprehension, and condense a Tao seal that belonged to oneself. Only in this way could one walk their own Tao and possess their own Tao. This was an extremely dangerous process, but also a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Yang Kai didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. He slowly poured his own understanding and comprehension into the embryonic form of the Tao seal, perfecting it little by little. He didn't know the passage of time, nor did he know whether the outside world was good or bad. His entire mind was immersed in the Tao seal. Slowly, the vague outline of the Tao seal began to take shape, and as Yang Kai worked hard, the outline became clearer and clearer. However, Yang Kai wasn't satisfied because this process was a little slow. At this time, he had completely forgotten about the crisis in the star boundary, but subconsciously, he knew very well that he had to condense his own Tao seal as soon as possible, otherwise, he would regret it for the rest of his life. Almost instinctively, Yang Kai took out the heaven and earth source liquid from the small sealed world bead, and took a big gulp. The feeling of splitting the heavens and earth came this time, shaking his spirit. When the heavens and earth were created, the world principles were extremely rich. This mouthful of heaven and earth source liquid seemed to have pulled Yang Kai back to the ancient era, when the heavens and earth were created. Immersed in the chaos, an invisible force wrapped around him from all directions, turning into the capital and strength to condense his Tao seal. Yang Kai devoured this force hungrily, and the speed at which the Tao seal was condensing in his body suddenly accelerated. The bright Tao seal flickered with dazzling brilliance as it imprinted itself on his dragon bone, causing Yang Kai's whole body to emit a faint golden light. Outside the High Heaven Palace, the sect defending array flashed wildly as countless demon dwellers pounced over. Attacks were launched from the High Heaven Palace, harvesting the lives of these demon dwellers like cutting straw. Corpses piled up into mountains and blood flowed freely. This was a turbulent era, an era of slaughter and baptism of blood. The life and death of the weak was out of control, and the strong were in danger of dying at any time. The heavenly way was ruthless and impermanent. Li Wuyi's black hair had turned into Yin-Si in just 10 days. Standing on the summit of High Heaven Peak, he looked outside the array with a solemn expression. The expressions of everyone behind him were also extremely solemn, although they had been on tenterhooks all this time, fearing that they would lose the High Heaven Palace, the last barrier and fortress of the star boundary. At this moment, no matter who it was, they were all filled with fighting spirit. If they could perish together with the world of heaven and earth, they would not let this life down. A figure rushed in from the front. It was Ying Fei. Wiping the blood off his face, he cupped his hands and said, "Reporting, the Northwest Great Array is in imminent danger. It will be broken in as short as an incense stick and as long as an hour. Sir Fu Renjia is requesting reinforcements." Li Wui turned his head around to take a look. There were no more reinforcements. Due to the urgent military situation, all the troops had been sent out. Right now, Towering Palace was under attack from all directions. The people behind him were just his personal guards who were in charge of relaying orders. They no longer had any soldiers they could use. Turning back, Li Wui coldly said, "Pass down the order. If the Northwest Array cannot be defended, tell Fu Renjie to drag a few more half-saint of demon race to the grave with him." Ying Fei's mouth squirmed a few times before he cupped his fists. "Yes." He turned around and flew out. Li Wui narrowed his eyes slightly, looked up at the heaven-void cauldron, and let out a long sigh. In the end, was there still no way to reverse the situation? Soon, he withdrew his gaze, and the principles of space fluctuated around his body. His expression was solemn as he asked, "Are you afraid?" The personal guards behind him who had been following him all this time shouted, "No." Li Wui grinned. "There is a great terror between life and death. Even this king is afraid, so why are you not?" The personal guards showed embarrassed expressions, and one of them said, "To be able to follow Master, even if we die on the battlefield, we will have no regrets." The others also cupped their fists and said in unison, "We are willing to live and die together with Master." Li Wui was in high spirits and shouted, "Good, that's the right way to think." His arms shook as he said in a deep voice, "All of you will follow this king into battle and kill the enemy." Murderous intent swept out fiercely. Master." A personal guard suddenly shouted in a trembling voice. Li Wui sneered, "Are you afraid? It's normal to be afraid." "No, Master, look over there." The personal guard pointed to the sky. Li Wui looked over and couldn't help but narrow his eyes. The patterns on the surface of the heaven-void cauldron, which had been floating in the sky all this time, were flashing even faster. The originally clear and changeable titles were now changing at a dazzling speed, and soon, the words were blurred. For so many days, the heaven-void cauldron had been in this state, and had never experienced such a change. No one had expected it to change at this time. "This is..." Li Wuyi's eyes suddenly widened as he stared fixedly at the heaven-void cauldron. The flickering patterns on the surface of the heaven-void cauldron were faintly condensing into two large characters, but the light was flickering too fast for anyone to see clearly. After a moment of silence, the two blurry characters finally became clear. At a certain moment, they stopped with a bang and a dazzling light filled the entire star boundary. At that moment, the demonic chi of the star boundary seemed to be torn apart, and the long-awaited light once again descended. Li Wuyi's eyes narrowed as he stared blankly at the two golden characters, his heart filled with joy. The void. Chapter 3793. The void. These two words attracted the gazes of every living being in the star boundary. At this moment, countless pairs of eyes involuntarily looked up. Whether it was the human demon or the demon race, their eyes flashed with an indescribable light. This was especially true for the natives of the star boundary. When those two words completely froze on the heaven-void cauldron, a thought almost instinctively appeared in their hearts. A new great emperors had been born in the star boundary. This thought came out of nowhere, and no one knew where it came from, but everyone believed it without a doubt. Because this was the will of the heavenly Tao, to be able to witness the birth of a new great emperors in their own era. What kind of honor was this? What kind of exhilarating matter was this? The originally dispirited morale suddenly skyrocketed at this moment. Xueli, who was hiding somewhere in the demon race's army, felt his eyelids twitch. He gritted his teeth and said, he actually succeeded. Although he learned from Jialong that the Genesis Empyrean fruit was obtained by Yang Kai in the end, Xueli still harbored a trace of hope. Yang Kai's strength wasn't enough. Even if he obtained the Genesis Empyrean fruit, he probably wouldn't be able to become one of the great emperors so quickly. At most, it would increase his strength, but he still wouldn't be a match for the demon saint. But now, it seemed that the Genesis Empyrean fruit was indeed boundless. It actually allowed that high-ranked demon king to directly become one of the great emperors. Xueli clenched his teeth and shouted the moment this thought appeared in his mind. Pass down my order. Regardless of casualties, take down the High Heaven Palace in the shortest time possible. Yang Kai had become one of the great emperors and obtained the title of Void. No one knew what kind of strength he would have when he reappeared, let alone when he would appear. What they needed to do now was to take down the High Heaven Palace as quickly as possible and soak the last pure land in the star boundary. Only then would all of their plans be considered complete. Even if Yang Kai really did have the strength of the great emperors, it would be useless. With this order, the already frenzied attacks increased by 30%. The High Heaven Palace's grand protective array wildly flashed with light, as if it could collapse at any moment. Noticing this, Li Wui hurriedly passed down the order. The surviving soldiers of the star boundary desperately resisted. Of the High Heaven Palace's various forces. While the two sides were fighting desperately, no one noticed that after the word void appeared in the sky, the Heaven Void Cauldron suddenly collapsed and soon disappeared. In the southeast corner of the High Heaven Palace, where the GZ army and the other 5 forces had set up a defense, Hyoji was sitting in the middle of the army. His expression was solemn as he gave out orders one after another. He had been fighting for many days, so he had not had a single moment of rest. His mind was operating at an extremely fast speed as he thought of a plan to defeat the enemy. Unfortunately, under the frenzied attacks of the demon race, all he could do was passively defend with the few troops he had. Army Master, the Grand Formation won't be able to hold on for much longer. A Yao general from Soaring Eagle Town rushed over. His excessive consumption of energy made it impossible for him to stand steadily. As he spoke, he even fell down in front of Hyoji. As soon as his voice fell, a sound of the formation being overwhelmed came from the other side, and then the sound of cracking could be heard incessantly. Hyoji raised his head and looked over, his expression changing drastically. He saw cracks appear on the light curtain of the grand formation in the southeast corner, quickly spreading out in all directions. Turning his head, Yang Kai saw Hua Qingxi floating in midair, holding the sect master's seal in her hand, and urging the power of the High Heaven Palace's spirit vein to replenish and stabilize the grand formation. But at this moment, her face was as pale as a sheet of paper, and her figure was on the verge of collapse. Although the High Heaven Palace's grand formation was powerful, it could not withstand the frenzied attacks of the demon race for such a long time. The only reason it had been able to hold on until now was thanks to the desperate efforts of the various forces in the star boundary. But at this moment, the grand formation finally could not hold on any longer. Walla. With a crisp sound, the grand formation in the southeast corner collapsed. The demon race's army poured in through the gap like a tidal wave, letting out earth-shattering roars that shook the heavens and earth. Hyoji stirred his emperor's chi and roared, "Those who invade the star boundary will be killed without mercy. Kill!" The soaring battle cries shook the world. Facing the demon race, none of the star boundary soldiers retreated, because everyone knew that the High Heaven Palace was the last place for the human race. Losing the High Heaven Palace was equivalent to losing the entire star boundary, and there was no place to retreat. Instead of being eroded by the demonic chi and becoming demonic creatures without intelligence, it was better to die on the battlefield and bite off a piece of flesh from the demon race before dying. The solemn wizard's curse sounded everywhere in the army, and the light of wizard techniques flashed, enveloping large swathes of the star boundary cultivator. Like two torrents of steel, they rushed towards each other and soon collided. Blood and severed limbs flew everywhere, and in that instant of confrontation, tens of thousands of creatures were annihilated. The huge southeast corner battlefield seemed to have turned into a huge meat grinder at this moment, grinding the human race and demon race into nothingness. However, this was just the beginning. Less than 10 breaths after the southeast corner's grand formation was broken, the entire High Heaven Palace's grand formation emitted a creaking sound, and with a series of cracking sounds, the grand formation collapsed inch by inch. The all-out decisive battle began. The demon race's army poured into the High Heaven Palace from all directions, stepping into the last pure land of the human race, bringing in the demonic chi and demon will. Close combat was a bloody and cruel scene. The High Heaven Palace's headquarters, which used to be beautiful, was instantly shattered. Many fake emperors attacked one after another, meeting the half-saints of the demon race, and fought fiercely in the sky. Even the two elders of the dragon clan couldn't sit still any longer. They turned into two huge dragons and rushed out from the Lingxiao Peak. The blood-spicy hibiscus and Huobu hastily went up to meet them. They were locked in a fierce battle even higher up in the sky. The rumbling sound spread throughout the 4 regions of the star boundary. On the ground, it was the battlefield of the fake emperors and half-saints. The demon king and the emperor realm were either in groups of 3 or 5, or fighting alone. It was either you die or I die. Somewhere on the battlefield, a huge palace was rampaging. Yang Xiao and Yang Shui controlled the flowing time temple, stood on the steps of the main hall, and jointly urged the power of the endless hourglass. The 10,008 grains of flowing time great emperor's divine sand turned into dust that filled the sky. Wherever they passed, the laws of time shrouded, depriving the demon race of their senses and vitality. On the other side, Lan Sun held the Yin-Yang pagoda in her hand, and her emperor's qi surged. Every time the Yin-Yang pagoda flew out, it could collect a large number of demon race and trap them inside. Not only that, but with her as the center, a huge cage made of vines enveloped all the demon race within a radius of 1,000 feet. In the cage, vines danced, turned into sharp blades, and stabbed into the demon race's bodies, devouring their essence, chi and soul. Soon many of the demon race turned into withered bones. In the mountain forest, the 9 stone mongoose rampaged under the leadership of their elders. Relying on their physical advantage, they crushed countless demon race's bodies. The wood spirit clan followed closely behind, not leaving a single step behind. Each of them had a solemn expression on their faces. On the mountain peak, Su Yan, Xia Ningchang, Shui Yu, and Shanqing Luo formed a strange battle array. Like a sharp knife, they shuttled back and forth through the bloody and corpse-filled battlefield. Wherever they passed, the demon race fell like straws. The 4 women's cultivations had all reached the emperor realm, and with the 4 of them working together, no one under the half-saint realm could stop them. Even a high-ranked demon king could not last more than 10 breaths of time in front of them. Their performance quickly attracted the attention of others. An illusory figure shuttled through the battlefield. His cold eyes stared at the 4 of them, and a cruel smile appeared on his lips. He quietly approached them. Within 100 feet of this figure, the human race cultivator fell to the ground one after another, before they could figure out what was going on. A moment later, this figure arrived not far from the 4 women. Without stopping, his figure flashed and a hidden attack slashed toward Xia Ningchang's neck. Su Yan, who was in the lead, frowned, instinctively feeling that something was wrong. Among the 4 women, she was the strongest and had the keenest perception. The moment she sensed that something was wrong, she shook the long sword in her hand and turned toward Xia Ningchang, shouting, "Ningchang, be careful!" The battle array formed by the 4 women was completely controlled by her. So as soon as she acted, Shui Yu and the others could not help but follow suit. With a series of clanging sounds, there seemed to be a figure flashing in the void. As sparks flew, a series of delicate cries rang out one after another. In an instant, the formation was broken, and the 4 women were sent flying in all directions. Even with the combined strength of the four of them, and the assistance of the spirit array, they were still unable to withstand even a single blow from the other party. In midair, Su Yan's heart sank. Her beautiful eyes stared in the direction of Xia Ningqiang, and finally saw the blurry figure of the person who had launched the sneak attack. Shadow Demon Half-Saint. Su Yan was shocked and hurriedly shouted, "Ningqiang, quickly dodge!" At this moment, Xia Ningqiang finally saw the appearance of the person who had ambushed her. It was a sinister-looking middle-aged man with a hooked nose. His entire body was shrouded in demonic qi, but before he appeared, she had not sensed it at all. After hearing Su Yan shout, how could she not understand what kind of situation she was in? Fighting was not her strong point. She had spent most of her life cultivating in the alchemy room, and because she had the sacred spirit medicine body, alchemy was part of her cultivation. Therefore, although her emperor qi was extremely pure, she did not have much real combat experience. This was the first time in her life that she had encountered such danger, but Xia Ningqiang found that her mind was surprisingly calm. Seeing the shadow demon half-saint opposite her grin at her, she raised her hand and threw out the One Realm bead. This was the One Realm bead that Yang Kai had refined when he was experimenting in the lower star territory. It did not have the ability to hold people, but after all, it was a result of painstaking refinement. There was no need to circulate one's emperor qi. Just throw it out, and it would display great power. The shadow demon half-saint opposite her coldly snorted, and lightly blocked with a dagger in his hand. To his surprise, a huge force came from the dagger, and almost sent him flying. Chapter 3794. This was not surprising, as the One Realm bead had been refined by Yang Kai using huge meteorites or dead stars. Although Xia Ningqiang and the others could control them without worry, the weight of the beads was still there. Under such a situation, the shadow demon half-saint naturally suffered a small loss. However, that was all. After pausing for a moment, the shadow demon half-saint chopped down with his dagger towards Xia Ningqiang's head as he sneered, "Die! Don't!" Su Yan screamed with all her might. Xia Ningqiang's vision seemed to freeze at this moment, and everything around her seemed to slow down. She clearly saw Su Yan rushing towards her with all her might, and the figure of a divine rainbow phoenix appeared behind her. She saw the terrified and helpless gazes of Shui Yu and Shanqing Luo as they fell to the ground, and saw the cold light flickering on the dagger. The aura of death rushed towards her, and the sharp aura pierced through her neck, causing her entire life to flash through her mind. Then, she saw a stalwart figure suddenly appear in front of her, just like when they had first gone to a nameless valley to obtain the 9 yuan condensing dew in the central capital. That night, that kiss had caused her to be in a state of chaos, making it difficult for her to part with him. That stalwart figure was like a mountain standing in front of her, blocking all the storms for her. Xia Ningqiang smiled. Surrounded by thousands of soldiers and horses, surrounded by a sea of blood and mountains of corpses, she couldn't help but feel a sense of peace and warmth in her heart. Dang! A light sound rang out, and sparks flew everywhere. The shadow demon half-saint's expression changed slightly, and he hurriedly pulled back. Yang Kai held the black dragon spear in his hand, and had no intention of chasing after him. He just stared at him quietly, and the coldness in his eyes made his opponent's heart turn cold. Their eyes met, and the shadow demon half-saint frowned. He couldn't see through Yang Kai's strength. The person standing in front of him didn't have any energy fluctuations, as if he was just an ordinary person who had never cultivated before. This phenomenon made him a little confused. Naturally, it was impossible for the other party to be an ordinary person who had never cultivated before. Just now, the huge cauldron in the sky had revealed the word void. This was an existence that had a high chance of becoming the great emperor's. "Little senior sister, are you all right?" Yang Kai glanced back at Xia Ningqiang and saw her smile from the bottom of her heart. She slowly shook her head, and her eyes were filled with tenderness. However, there was a clear bloodstain on her fair neck and dark red blood was seeping out from it. Staring at the bloodstain, Yang Kai felt a burst of fear and felt his scalp go numb. He had rushed over as soon as he came out of the mysterious Tian temple, and didn't stop at all. Fortunately, he had come in time. If he had come a little later, he wouldn't have been able to see such a sweet smile right now. His heart palpitated, and he became furious. When he turned his head again, he looked at the shadow demon half-saint with a gaze that pierced through his heart and filled with killing intent. The shadow demon half-saint coldly snorted and didn't bother with Yang Kai. His figure quickly faded and disappeared as if he had never appeared. Naive, Yang Kai coldly said. Without any movement, his figure suddenly appeared in front of Shui Yu, and he thrust his spear forward. With a whoosh, the sound of something being pierced rang out. Immediately after, blood spurted out of the void, and a blurry figure quickly solidified. It was the shadow demon half-saint who had just disappeared. However, at this moment, he was looking at Yang Kai with a horrified expression. He grabbed the black dragon spear that was stabbed into his chest and said in disbelief, "You!" It was as if he had seen something inconceivable. He was a shadow demon half-saint, and was naturally proficient in concealment and assassination. He had never expected that he would be so easily found by his opponent and heavily injured. It was only because he couldn't estimate Yang Kai's strength that he wanted to attack Shui Yu. As long as he could capture Shui Yu, he could use her to restrain Yang Kai whether he killed her or captured her. However, that lightning-fast spear strike had shattered all of his hopes. He didn't even see how the spear struck him before he was hit. A mysterious force rushed into his body and wreaked havoc on his meridians and flesh. The shadow demon half-saint's heart sank. How could he not know that this was the strange true meaning of martial Tao? Gritting his teeth, he exerted force in his hand, and his body retreated. He directly pulled himself out of the black dragon spear, causing a large amount of blood to spurt out. He didn't dare to stay in place, and his figure flickered as he tried to escape. That mysterious spear strike had completely disintegrated his fighting spirit and fighting spirit. However, before he could do anything, he saw a sky full of spear shadows coming towards him. The shadow demon was shocked and hurriedly waved the daggers in his hands to block. Ding ding dang dang dang. A series of crisp sounds rang out as the two figures crossed back and forth within a radius of less than 10 meters. After 3 breaths, the fierce battle came to a stop. Looking around, Su Yan and the others' eyes shone with surprise and joy. The black dragon spear pierced through the shadow demon's head from the forehead to the back of his head. The shadow demon half-saint's eyes widened, and the horrified expression on his face was clearly visible. Yang Kai's expression was indifferent, neither happy nor sad. With a shake of his spear, the shadow demon's entire body was shaken into powder. "Protect yourself," Yang Kai hurriedly instructed the 4 girls. His figure leaped and flew straight into the sky. He flew until he reached a height of 10,000 meters before he suddenly stopped. Placing the black dragon spear beside him, Yang Kai's gaze swept down. He spread out one hand and whispered, "My name is Void." His voice wasn't loud, but it resounded throughout the entire world. When that voice rang out, no matter which corner of the star boundary it was filled with this low and solemn chant. The spread out one hand slowly covered down, and the low chant sounded again, reaching straight to the heart. "My Tao is the Tao of space." The hand under the cover suddenly pressed down. Annihilation. The void trembled and heaven and earth hummed. Countless tiny void cracks appeared out of thin air in a large area. The void cracks were like spirit snakes, cutting through the bodies of the demon race one after another. In the next moment, the human race soldiers who were fighting against the demon race were surprised to find that their opponents revealed extremely shocked expressions. Then, with a series of crashing sounds, they were torn apart. Blood spurted out from the pieces of corpses, drenching the heads and faces of countless people. With a single palm strike, millions of soldiers of the demon race were wiped out. The huge battlefield was cleared. What was shocking was that the human race soldiers on this battlefield were unscathed. The battlefield that was filled with endless fighting and clamoring fell into a strange silence at this moment. Everyone stared blankly at the scattered corpses in front of them. It was as if they were in a dream. The enemies who were fighting desperately just a moment ago had died without a complete corpse in the blink of an eye. In the sky, After Yang Kai's palm strike, he didn't stop. He aimed another palm strike at another location. With each strike, millions of soldiers of the demon race died under his palms. Since the beginning of the war between the two worlds, the human race and demon race had finally witnessed for the first time what kind of destructive power the great emperors could unleash on this kind of battlefield. There had never been a great emperors or demon saint who had done such a thing. Due to various constraints and unavoidable reasons, their opponents would always be each other. Even if they fought until the sky turned dark, it would never affect their respective armies. Until today, whether it was the human race or the demon race, it was the first time that they had personally witnessed the terror of the great emperors recognized by the heavenly Tao. High in the sky, Xue Li's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Even though he was entangled with the two great elders of the dragon race, he could still clearly sense the movements on the battlefield below. When Yang Kai had appeared, he had sensed him. When Yang Kai had killed a shadow demon half-saint within 3 breaths, the last trace of hope in his heart had disappeared without a trace. In the past, he had looked down on him. In the past, he could only hide in front of him. Now he really had the power of a great emperor. Now he could fly into the sky and stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Only the great emperors could kill a shadow demon half-saint in such a short amount of time. And Yang Kai's following actions made Xue Li even more furious. In just 10 breaths, the army of millions of soldiers of the demon race had been annihilated. He almost couldn't accept such a great loss. The plan that should have been the final step had been changed because of this mouse's appearance. A bad feeling lingered in his heart, causing Xue Li to go completely berserk. You want to save your demon bastard? You'll have to get through this old man first. Zhu Yan roared angrily as the 1,000-foot-long dragon's tail swept over. Even Xue Li didn't dare to face it head-on, and had no choice but to dodge. Zhu Yan, who was already in despair, had the urge to laugh out loud at this moment. After all, anyone who saw a trace of light in a hopeless situation would be greatly comforted. The 3 demon saints of the demon race were being held back by him and Fu Tin. As long as they didn't attack, Yang Kai was an invincible existence based on his performance just now. He would probably be able to wipe out the entire demon race army below in less than 2 hours. When that time came, who would cry and who would laugh? Xue Li clenched his teeth. Do you think that he can do whatever he wants just because he became one of the great emperors? Old man, have you become muddle-headed? Xue Li's words had a hidden meaning. Zhu Yan was shocked when he heard this, but before he could react, he suddenly felt the presence of another great emperors appear out of nowhere. Zhu Yan paled in shock and hurriedly turned his head in the direction of Yang Kai and roared, "Watch out! I've been waiting for a long time." Yang Kai wasn't surprised at all. Instead, it was as if he had expected this. He flicked the black dragon spear and swept it horizontally. A wild power swept out, and the might of this spear seemed to even activate the will of the world. A figure was forced out, and looked at him with a serious expression. Yang Kai held the spear with one arm, and pointed it forward. He looked deeply at the person who had come, and an indescribable disgust and hatred flashed through his eyes as he said darkly, "Qin Yi." The figure in front of him was completely wrapped in black energy. Even with Yang Kai's divine sense, he couldn't see his true appearance. He also exuded the unique presence of great emperors. Who else could it be other than Night Shadow, the great emperor Qin Yi? Chapter 3795. Previously, when the Dark Heaven Palace had opened, many half-saint from the demon race had obtained a lot of information about the battle of the Great Tao from Qin Yi. This undoubtedly meant that Qin Yi was in the Star Realm, but he was hiding somewhere to recuperate. Since he knew this information, how could Yang Kai not be on guard against him? Qin Yi had been injured because he had used himself as a bridge to connect the 2 realms, forcefully opening a passage between the 2 realms. Afterwards, he had been created by the Iron Blood Great Emperor Zhan Wuhen. Since then, there had been no news of him. He was obviously in seclusion to recuperate. And now the battle of the 2 realms had reached the most crucial moment. Whether he was willing or not, he could no longer stay out of it. As expected, When Yang Kai returned from the Dark Heaven Palace with the might of the great emperors, Night Shadow, who had been hiding in the darkness all this time, finally appeared. Black fog covered his face, and King Ye's true appearance was hidden, but Yang Kai could clearly sense that a pair of eyes was examining him deeply from within the black fog. "You are still not one of the great emperors." A sonorous voice came from the other side, like metal rubbing against metal. It was extremely uncomfortable when it entered his ears. "The heavens acknowledge me, so I am one of the great emperors," Yang Kai replied indifferently. Ken Yi slowly shook his head. "This world is struggling at death's door. Don't rely on it. You have not reached the level of the great emperors." Yang Kai grinned. "So what? I have always liked to challenge those of a higher cultivation level. And under normal circumstances, it is always my enemies who end up in tragedy. What's more, how much strength can you display?" Though it was only a short exchange, Yang Kai still keenly grasped King Ye's current state. His injuries had not healed. His injuries were caused by Zhan Wuhen, and at their cultivation level, once they were injured, how could they completely recover in 3 to 5 years? Though King Yi had been in seclusion these few years, concentrating on recuperating, the time was too short, and not enough for his injuries to completely recover. If Yang Kai did not appear, he should not have rushed out of seclusion. It was because of Yang Kai's appearance that he had no choice but to act and stop him. A meaningless struggle before death. Ken Yi lowered his head to look at the battlefield below. The two great elders of the dragon race are unable to free themselves. Even if you are acknowledged by the heavenly Tao, if I were to stop you, you would definitely be too distracted to do so. And without you, the High Heaven Palace would definitely fall within 2 hours. By then, no matter how vast this world is, I'm afraid there would be no place for you all to stay." Yang Kai lowered his head slightly. "It seems like I'll have to kill you within 2 hours. You can try." When the last word fell, King Yi suddenly raised his hand, and a 3-meter-long curved saber appeared in his hand, slashing forward. In front of him, Yang Kai appeared strangely, and the black dragon spear came straight at him. On the tip of the spear, there was a huge black ball that exuded an aura that could collapse the world. The curved blade struck the black orb, and the black orb disappeared without a trace. King Ye's entire body shook, and he involuntarily flew backwards. This attack even caused the black fog that had been shrouding his face to dissipate, revealing a pair of astonished eyes. In the second exchange, he was actually at a slight disadvantage. Even though he had yet to recover from his heavy injuries, and was unable to display his full strength, Yang Kai's strength still shocked him. In his perception, Yang Kai had indeed not reached their level, but because of the final struggle of the heavens and earth, he had obtained the title of Great Emperors, and possessed some of the abilities of the Great Emperors. Who knew that he could actually display the power that Great Emperors should have? The dissipated black fog condensed again, blocking his strange expression, and his figure rapidly faded. Yang Kai reached out and covered him, roaring, "In the name of the void, form the lock of the heavens and earth seal." Walalala. A strange sound came from the void, and streaks of invisible void power gathered to the point that they were visible to the naked eye. With Yang Kai as the center, they suddenly spread out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, those streaks of transparent chains completely sealed off the heavens and earth within a radius of 10,000 miles, turning into a gigantic cage. King Ye's figure slowly appeared in a corner of the cage, and like a ghost, he quietly floated in midair, not saying a single word. Yang Kai pointed his spear forward and roared, "King Yi, today either you die or I die." As his words fell, multiple spatial cracks appeared in this gigantic cage. Inside the cage, the heavens and earth collapsed, and only King Ye's side was unaffected. King Yi was moved and said darkly, "You're crazy." From Yang Kai's tone, he could hear the determination. In other words, Yang Kai was not trying to scare him, but really wanted to fight him to the death here. This was simply unreasonable. At their level, it was extremely difficult to determine life and death in a one-on-one battle, especially when he himself was one of the great emperors recognized by the heavens and earth. Furthermore, even if this world was completely corroded, with Yang Kai's current strength, nothing would happen to him. so he could not understand why Yang Kai was acting like this. If you're not mad demon, you won't live. Yang Kai looked coldly at Qin Yi. Less nonsense, die. He clenched his hand towards Qin Yi, and the countless spatial cracks in the cage instantly shot towards Qin Yi like a group of snakes coming out of their holes. Qin Yi slashed down with his curved blade, and the strike, full of the power of the heavens and earth, looked ordinary, but was extremely mysterious. His body was like a reef in the sea, towering and unmoving. Those spatial cracks involuntarily slid past him, and he was actually unharmed. At the same time, Yang Kai had already arrived with his spear, and before he arrived, he spat a mouthful of blood essence onto the black dragon spear. Two resounding dragon roars rang out almost at the same time. The dazzling golden divine dragon's essence flashed, and the black dragon spear also transformed into a gigantic black dragon that bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it pounced towards Qin Yi. That ancient presence seemed to pull people into an extremely distant era, shocking their minds. Qin Yi's expression changed slightly, and as his figure swayed, he actually turned into countless figures. Every figure was exactly the same as him, and even the presence they exuded was flawless. Countless Qin Yi waved the curved blades in their hands, and a low chant rang out, "Shadow dance kill." Blade light flashed, and a huge dragon roared. The black dragon's image crumbled and turned back into the black dragon spear, colliding with the blade light. Ding ding dang dang sounds rang out incessantly, and the void collapsed as heaven and earth turned upside down. If it weren't for the cage that Yang Kai had set up beforehand, the clash between the two great emperors would have been enough to shatter the heaven and earth within a radius of several million miles. Only Yang Kai could set up such a sealing cage. His Tao was the Tao of space, so he had a unique advantage in this kind of matter. If it had been any other great emperors, they wouldn't have been able to do this. The aftermath of the clash wantonly spread out in the cage, and the heaven and earth within the cage completely collapsed, turning into chaos. The two armies below even stopped fighting because of this, and raised their heads to look up. Many half-saint false emperors even distanced themselves from each other, quietly watching. Everyone knew that the battle between Yang Kai and Qin Yi would definitely affect the survival of the Star Realm. Although the battle between the two great elders of the dragon race, and Shueli, and the others was also related to the overall situation. The five of them had already fought countless times. Every time, they were evenly matched, and no one could do anything to the other. This time would probably be the same. Only Yang Kai's side had a chance of survival. However, although they were paying close attention, no one could clearly see the situation on the battlefield. Inside the cage of heaven and earth, there was only violent power sweeping out, and the aura of chaos pervaded the air. Occasionally, two figures would flash by, and even their appearances couldn't be seen clearly, so how could they tell who was better and who was worse? "General Master, what's the situation?" A legion commander quietly snuck up beside Li Wui, and asked seriously. If there was anyone in the Star Realm who could see the situation of the battle, it would be Li Wui. No one else had the qualifications to do so. Unexpectedly, Li Wui also shook his head with a bitter smile, and said, "I can't see clearly." The legion commander was speechless. If even Li Wui couldn't see clearly, didn't that mean that Yang Kai had really reached the level of great emperors? How could the false emperors predict the battle between great emperors? With this thought, the legion commander's spirits were lifted. A loud boom came from the huge cage, and in the chaotic heaven and earth, the two entangled figures finally separated. A series of exclamations came from all over the world. Under the attention of many false emperors, Yang Kai's face was pale, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. It seemed that he had been injured. Even so, Yang Kai was still smiling, and his indifferent voice sounded, "Night Shadow great emperors are just so." As soon as he said this, everyone in the Star Realm was shocked. They turned to look in Qin Yi's direction, and couldn't help but gape. Because at this very moment, the black fog that had been shrouding Qin Yi's face had actually disappeared, revealing an extremely ordinary face. That face didn't have the slightest bit of peculiarity, and if thrown into a crowd, probably no one would give it a second look. That face looked to be about 40 years old, and was a male's face. This was the true appearance of the great emperors of Night Shadow. No one had ever seen what the great emperors of Night Shadow looked like. Even other great emperors had never seen him before, and they didn't even know whether he was a man or a woman. Until now, under the gaze of the great army of the Star Realm, Kenye's appearance was known to the whole world. Chi! A sound was heard. Kenye lowered his head to look, and his eyes narrowed slightly. There was a foot-long wound on his waist, and blood was spurting out. A strange power was growing at the wound, and it was like a maggot in his bones, causing him to feel uneasy. The short and hurried exchange just now was actually a situation where both sides were injured. With a cold humph, Kenye activated his own power, and suppressed and sealed the true intent of martial arts that had invaded his body. This true intent of martial arts was extremely difficult to deal with. Even if he was one of the great emperors, it wasn't easy to dissolve it. Now that Yang Kai was eyeing him covetously, how could he give him the time to dissolve it calmly? Naturally, he could only suppress it first. Just as he finished doing this, Yang Kai said with a solemn expression, "The test ends here. Kenye, next year on this day, it will be the anniversary of your death." Arrogant Jr. A hint of anger appeared on Kenye's face. Obviously, he was greatly angered by Yang Kai's shameless boasting. "Arrogant or not, eat my spear first," Yang Kai shouted in a low voice. His feet moved, and his spear shot out like a dragon, ignoring the obstruction of space. Chapter 3796. Seeing that Yang Kai was injured, the hearts of the many elites of the Star Realm and the countless soldiers below couldn't help but jump to their throats. But the next scene made their eyes light up. When that spear shot out, Kenye's expression changed again. He felt as if the will of the whole world was pressing down on him. Even though he was as strong as the great emperors, he actually felt some difficulty in breathing. He hastily parried, but a huge force came at him head-on, and he couldn't help but fly backwards. Yang Kai followed him like a shadow, and his spear was heavier than the last. His expression was calm, but his attacks were ruthless and merciless. Hong hong hong. One fierce attack after another actually caused Kenye to be somewhat exhausted from parrying. His figure continuously moved about within that gigantic cage, yet he was unable to break free from it in the end. Under everyone's gaze, the great emperors were instantly suppressed and completely at a disadvantage. Everyone was in an uproar. No one had expected such a scene. Even though they knew that Yang Kai already had the power of the great emperors, Kenye had been famous for a long time. Even if Yang Kai had the power to fight him, it was hard to say who would win in the end. However, looking at the current situation, Yang Kai had the upper hand. Kenye's injuries are probably not light. A thoughtful look flashed through Li Wuyi's eyes. The army commander who came to his side earlier said, "In that case, it's not that Kenye is inferior to Yang Void Master, but because his injuries haven't healed yet?" Li Wuyi nodded. "That should be the case. Or maybe it's because of the momentum. Yang Kai wanted to save the Star Realm, so he could only end the battle within 2 hours, so he naturally didn't hold back. But Kenye was different. He only needed to stall for time, and there was no need to fight to the death with Yang Kai. Once the High Heaven Palace was completely eroded, then no matter how strong Yang Kai was, he wouldn't be able to reverse the situation. One was using all his strength, while the other was holding back. In addition, Kenye was injured, so it wasn't strange for such a situation to occur. Arrogant Jr. Within the cage, Kenye's suppressed growl was heard, as if enraged. "Don't go too far." Yang Kai didn't answer. His boundless fighting spirit burned fiercely, and there was also the dense killing intent that was locked onto Kenye. "All right, since that's the case, we'll do as you wish." As Kenye shouted angrily, his other empty hand suddenly clenched in the air, and another curved saber leisurely appeared. With both sabers in his hands, the aura on Kenye's body suddenly changed. Invisibly, the will of heaven and earth gathered on his body, crossing and blocking in front of him. Boom! A loud sound rang out. Kenye, who had been constantly retreating and falling into a disadvantageous position, actually stood firmly in place at this moment. Yang Kai pressed down with his spear, and the black dragon's spear rubbed against the two curved blades, producing an ear-piercing sound as dazzling sparks flowed out. There was only a distance of 3 zhang between them. When their eyes met, one flew into a rage while the other's aura was as deep as the abyss. Around the two of them, their 4 extremities were shattered. This lord is also one of the great emperors recognized by the Star Realm. The mighty power of heaven and earth isn't something you can mobilize. Qin Yi roared. The reason why great emperors were called great emperors was because they were recognized by heaven and earth. They carried the will of heaven and earth, and could mobilize the mighty power of heaven and earth. This was the biggest difference between great emperors and ordinary venerable sovereigns. Yang Kai grinned maliciously. So what? As he spoke, he suddenly exerted force in his hand. On the dragon bone in his spine, the newly condensed Dao seal glowed brightly, and boundless mighty power gathered on his body. The deadlock was instantly broken, and Qin Yi retreated step by step. The sudden change caused Qin Yi's expression to change greatly, and he cried out involuntarily, "How is this possible?" In that instant, he actually felt that the connection between him and heaven and earth had weakened by a sliver. On the other hand, the mighty power of heaven and earth on Yang Kai's side had suddenly increased by a bit. If that wasn't the case, the balance wouldn't have been broken. Yang Kai looked at him with pity. Nothing is impossible. You've abandoned this heaven and earth, and you think this heaven and earth will still allow you to do whatever you want? The force in his hand increased again, and a ring of vibration suddenly spread out. Qin Yi was suddenly blasted away like a shooting star, and he spat out blood in midair. Yang Kai stood in the air, his voice indifferent. The heaven and earth have a spirit, Qin Yi. Do you still not understand? If the heaven and earth didn't have a spirit, the Dark Heaven Palace wouldn't have been opened at the last moment of the Star Realm's survival. If the heaven and earth didn't have a spirit, Yang Kai wouldn't have been protected by the mystery realm of heaven and earth after fighting for the origin heavenly fruit. The heaven and earth were constantly paying attention to these billions of living beings, and the invisible heavenly Tao could always guide the clearest path at the most crucial moment. Qin Yi stopped, wiped the blood at the corner of his mouth, and said coldly, "If the heaven and earth had a spirit, how could it allow this lord to become one of the great emperors? Don't say such nonsense." Yang Kai sneered. "Don't you know in your heart whether it's nonsense or not? Since you've turned your back on the great Tao of heaven and earth, then please return everything you've obtained from this heaven and earth." The moment he finished speaking, a huge crack suddenly split open in the air behind Yang Kai. The crack's shape was strange, and it looked like an eye, indifferently watching Qin Yi. Qin Yi couldn't help but widen his eyes, staring at the huge eye in the sky in horror. When they looked at each other, the connection between him and the heaven and earth actually quickly weakened. Yang Kai opened his arms, a strange expression appearing on his face. The invisible power of the heaven and earth gathered in his body, and the black dragon spear in his hand emitted waves of dragon roars. "Qin Yi!" All of a sudden, Yang Kai roared, his face ferocious. "Although you have the bloodline of the demon race, you were born in the Star Realm and grew up in the Star Realm. It's this heaven and earth that gave you the honor you have today. It's this heaven and earth that allowed you to become a human sovereign. It's fine if you don't think of repaying it, but now you've abandoned the heaven and earth, abandoned all living beings, and led foreign enemies to invade. Death is truly not to be regretted. Today, this lord will enforce justice on behalf of the heavens." The black dragon's spear stabbed into the air, and he formed a seal with one hand. An incomparably mysterious mark suddenly appeared behind him. "Dao seal." Qin Yi's eyes widened, and he looked at Yang Kai with extreme shock. "What are you doing?" He was also one of the great emperors, so he naturally understood what a Dao seal was. This was the crystallization of a great emperor's lifetime of power, which was almost equivalent to the monster beast's inner core. The monster beast would spit out its own inner core to attack a strong enemy in a desperate situation. That was the struggle of a trapped beast. If one was lucky, they might be able to turn defeat into victory. But if one was unlucky, then the result would be the scattering of their soul. It could be said that the monster beast's method was a double-edged sword. A single mistake, and they would be consigned to eternal damnation. Qin Yi had been one of the great emperors for so many years, but he had never seen anyone release a Dao seal from their body. But then again, the great emperors of the Star Realm hadn't fought with each other in all these years. At most, they had sparred with each other a few times, and it was unknown to the public. During sparring, no one would easily release a Dao seal. So, this was also the first time he had seen someone use such an attack. That Dao seal had a flowing halo that flickered in and out of existence, just like the law of space that Yang Kai controlled. It was unfathomable and strange, and from that Dao seal, an incomparably terrifying aura fluctuated. Everyone who saw this Dao seal couldn't help but feel a chill. They had no doubt that if this thing was struck in the Star Realm, it was very possible that it could destroy a territory. The power of heaven and earth gathered madly in that Dao seal, causing that Dao seal to become brighter and brighter. In the blink of an eye, it was as if a small sun was hanging in the sky, and everyone couldn't help but close their eyes. There is not much time. This one strike will decide life and death. Yang Kai's expression was indifferent, as if the Dao seal in front of him wasn't the most important thing to him, but a secret treasure that could be casually thrown out. But it was this indifference that made Qin Yi feel terrified. If it was possible, Yang Kai wouldn't be willing to take such a risk. He had just obtained a fated opportunity and had a chance of peering into the mysteries of the peak of martial arts, so he naturally cherished his own wings. But now time waited for no one. If he continued to tangle with Qin Yi, though he was confident that he could win, it was definitely not something that could be resolved in a short time. Only this way, only this kind of risk could settle the matter in one fell swoop. With a decision in his heart, he didn't hesitate anymore. Even if it would damage the foundation of his great Dao, he wouldn't hesitate. Go. As he spoke, Yang Kai pointed, and that dazzling Dao seal slowly floated towards Qin Yi. It wasn't fast, and it looked like any ordinary person could dodge it. But in Qin Yi's vision, it was as if the whole Star Realm was pressing towards him. He couldn't dodge it. That was an attack that gathered a huge amount of the world's mighty power, and it was launched by a Dao seal. No one in the world could dodge such an attack. He could only block it with his life. With a furious roar, Qin Yi gritted his teeth and pointed forward. In front of his fingertips, a seal also appeared. This seal looked a little similar to Yang Kai's Dao seal, both mysterious and unparalleled, but it was pitch black, and the whole Dao seal gave off a feeling of both sharpness and concealment. This was Qin Yi's Dao, the Dao of assassination and concealment. Under the attention of countless pairs of eyes, the two Dao seals approached each other. They collided soundlessly, and black and white light filled the sky, turning into two huge semicircles of different colors that faced off against each other. Yang Kai and Qin Yi both spat out blood, their bodies and minds shaking. Under everyone's nervous gazes, that white suddenly expanded and invaded the black territory. In the blink of an eye, the black quickly melted and was completely filled with white light. It was as if the two armies had decided victory and defeat, and the black army was defeated like a landslide, utterly defeated. In the world, Qin Yi's unwilling roar rang out. The blazing white light enveloped the void and gradually dissipated, and everyone's vision recovered. Everyone looked over nervously. In the sky, two figures stood in the air. The cage that Yang Kai had set up was now gone. Although it was formed by borrowing the power of heaven and earth, it still couldn't withstand the impact of the two great emperors' Dao seals, and had long dissipated. In the void, a huge black hole appeared, and this world seemed to be missing a large piece. However, it was also thanks to the obstruction of that cage, or it would have been missing more than that. At this moment, the two figures in the sky were in a sorry state. Yang Kai was bleeding from all 7 orifices, and his face was pale. Qin Yi's hair was disheveled like a ghost, and his whole person was on the verge of collapse. Everyone was shocked. They thought it would be an unprecedented battle, a fierce battle, but who knew that after Yang Kai struck out with his Dao seal, the outcome was decided in less than 10 breaths' time. This speed was simply shocking. This was a battle between great emperors, so how could it end in such a short time? Chapter 3797. However, at first glance, it was impossible to tell who had the upper hand. Panting sounds were heard as Yang Kai's chest heaved. He reached out and grasped the black dragon spear beside him. His face was full of reminiscence as he said in a low voice, "This spear is for this beautiful universe that gave birth to us and raised us." When he finished speaking, his figure flashed, and he instantly appeared in front of Qin Yi, firing a spear. Qin Yi raised his sabers to parry, but it was as if he had lost all his strength. The two curved sabers hadn't even been completely raised when his body shook. The black dragon spear had already pierced through his lower abdomen and came out through his body. A violent power exploded from his back, blasting his clothes into shreds, and a huge bloody hole appeared on his back. Kanye's eyes widened as he stared at Yang Kai, who was standing in front of him. Grinding his teeth, he said in a deep voice, "This king is Night Shadow Emperor." Yang Kai turned a deaf ear to him. He pulled out his spear, drawing a large amount of blood, and suddenly stabbed out again. His voice was indifferent. "This spear is for the billions of lives that died in the star world." With a whoosh, the black dragon spear pierced through his heart. Kanye's body shook again. Blood spilled from the corner of his mouth, and his throat gurgled. "This lord has roamed the star world for tens of thousands of years." The spear rose again, and Yang Kai's indifferent voice suddenly became louder as he complained with blood and tears, "This spear is for Bright Moon Master." That sorrowful voice resonated with the entire star world. With a crack, lightning flashed, and heavy rain fell from the sky without warning. Lightning flashed and thunder roared as the spear struck towards Kanye's head. With one strike, the head exploded, and red and white matter sputtered in all directions. Ka-cha-cha! The lightning danced more and more fiercely, and the rain fell more and more rapidly, washing away this filthy world. Between heaven and earth, there seemed to be a faint sigh, and the huge crack behind Yang Kai that was like a heavenly eye slowly closed at this moment. No one announced or informed, but in this instant, a trace of understanding appeared in the hearts of every living thing in the star world. The great emperors had fallen. Yang Kai withdrew his spear and stood there, taking a deep breath. An unprecedented joy in his heart made him unable to help but howl at the sky. His howl rolled like thunder, and combined with the sound of thunder, it shook people's eardrums. It wasn't that killing a great emperor's made him so happy, but that he had finally avenged Mingyu's blood feud. Mingyu's death in the Eternal Heaven continent was caused by the joint efforts of many demon saints. But the real fatal blow was given by Qin Yi. Yang Kai had watched that battle from a distance, and saw it clearly. If Qin Yi hadn't suddenly appeared at the last moment, and launched a sneak attack on Mingyu Great Emperor, Mingyu might have had a chance to survive. After all, he had been on guard against all the Devil's Saints at that time. But he had not been on guard against Qin Yi appearing in the Eternal Heaven. It was also because of that battle that Yang Kai received Mingyu's favor, and the world's favor, that he was able to walk to the end of the battle of the Great Tao, and obtain the origin heavenly fruit. It could be said that his achievements today were all thanks to Mingyu's great emperors. Since he had received their favor, he naturally had to avenge them. Unfortunately, he wasn't strong enough before. Even if he wanted to, he was powerless. Now that the heavens had given him such a good opportunity, how could Yang Kai miss it? Only at this moment did Yang Kai feel that the burden that had been weighing on his heart had finally been lifted. Amidst the rolling howls, the demon race army was like quails without a nest in winter, shivering. The expressions of many spectating half-saint changed, and fear overflowed on their faces. Inside the high heaven palace, on a mountain peak full of corpses, Lan Sun stared at the headless corpse in the sky. Tears flowed down her cheeks, and she knelt on the ground with a plop, crying loudly, "Father, Qin Yi is dead. Rest in peace." Not far behind her, Shao Chun, who was covered in blood and holding a longsword, stared blankly ahead. His heart was full of bitterness. Was the gap between them already so big? "I'm afraid I won't be able to catch up to him in this lifetime." Angry roars came from the clouds, mixed with the resounding roars of dragons. Looking at the sky, 5 figures were entangled with each other at an unknown height, gradually moving further and further away from each other. Kan Yi Wang, Xueli, and the others were both frightened and didn't dare to stay any longer. Naturally, they immediately fled. Otherwise, when Yang Kai came back to his senses, they wouldn't be able to leave even if they wanted to. The two great elders of the dragon race were already evenly matched with them. If Yang Kai was added, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. Moreover, they were also frightened by Yang Kai's reckless fighting style just now. The three of them had fought with the two great elders of the dragon race many times, but they never dared to release their seals to kill the enemy. Yang Kai, this guy, had just become one of the great emperors, and he was already so daring. He simply couldn't be judged with common sense. As soon as the three demon saint retreated, the morale of the demon race army on the battlefield immediately collapsed. The half-saint followed closely behind, and the demon race army on the ground naturally collapsed. After being bullied and forced by the demon race for many years and fleeing countless times, the army of the astral realm had long been suppressing a bellyful of anger. Moreover, just now, even the last pure land of the astral realm had almost been invaded. At this time, how could they easily let the demon race go? The remaining astral realm army immediately swarmed out of the high heaven palace and chased after the enemy in all directions, leaving millions of corpses in their wake. What made all the demon race slightly relieved was that Yang Kai had been standing in the same spot, without moving after killing King Yi. Not only did he not go to help the two great elders of the dragon race, he didn't even pay attention to the retreating demon race army. It wasn't that Yang Kai didn't want to pay attention to them. If possible, he naturally wanted to make the demon race army completely stay here. And with his current power, it was possible for him to do so. Previously, King Yi had come out to obstruct him, and now that even King Yi was dead, who in this world could stop him? However, in the battle with King Yi, although he had killed a strong enemy, he had also paid a great price. The hidden danger caused by the collision of Dao seals was no small matter. The Dao seal that was originally imprinted in the dragon bones and emitted a bright light couldn't help but become somewhat dim at this moment. After all, King Yi was also one of the great emperors. Although he was abandoned by the world at the last moment and could no longer mobilize the mighty power of the world in this side of the world, his own power was still there. He had fought with his life on the line, causing a great shock to Yang Kai. And after that, Yang Kai had shot out 3 consecutive spears. Those 3 spears looked very ordinary, extremely ordinary. But how could the 3 spears that could kill the great emperors be so simple? Almost every spear shot had taken a great deal of Yang Kai's energy. At this moment he couldn't move at all. If Xue Li and the others were a little braver, and broke free from Zhu Yan and Fu Tian to come find him, he wouldn't even have the strength to fight back. Under inner sight, not only was the Dao seal in the dragon bones dim, but it also showed signs of crumbling. Yang Kai was truly scared out of his wits. If his Dao seal really crumbled like this, then he would be the shortest-lived great emperors in history. He had just stepped out of the Dark Heaven Palace, and his Dao foundation had crumbled in less than half a day. How could he dare hesitate? He hurriedly thought of a way to stabilize his Dao seal. And in front of him, King Ye's headless corpse strangely didn't fall. Instead, it gradually melted like a snowflake under the sun. Not long after, King Ye's corpse melted without a trace. The fortune of heaven and earth that he had once seized in the Dark Heaven Palace returned to the Star Realm. Those with low strength couldn't sense it, but those above false emperor level could sense that there was something else in the world. That thing was extremely mysterious, and if they could take the opportunity to comprehend it, they would definitely benefit immensely. When Yang Kai opened his eyes again, half a day had already passed. Night had fallen, and the world was dark. Devil intent wreaked havoc in the universe, and even the sky was hazy. The stars, sun, and moon couldn't be seen. With a glance, he saw a large group of people standing in front of him, and the leaders were Zhu Yan and Fu Tian. "How is it?" Fu Tian asked nervously. Although she and Zhu Yan were tangled in a fight with the 3 demon saint, they were also clear of Yang Kai's movements. Naturally, they knew how Yang Kai killed King Yi at the last moment. They were all extremely worried, afraid that something would happen to Yang Kai's Dao seal. Yang Kai slowly shook his head and smiled. "It's fine. Thank you for your concern, second elder. Although the Tao seal was still a little dim at this moment, at least there was no risk of it collapsing. As long as it's slowly cultivated in the future, it would naturally recover. But if it was the same as before, Kaiyang didn't dare to use it again. Previously, he was forced by the situation, and he was also a little fearless. Now that he understood the dangers involved, Yang Kai had to be a little more cautious. It's good that you're fine. Zhu Yan let out a long breath, and his worried heart finally relaxed. The young man in front of him was now not only the great emperors of the star boundary, but also the dragon god of the dragon race. This matter concerned the survival of the dragon race and the entire star boundary, so how could Zhu Yan not be nervous? Li Wuyi and his colleagues greet the Void Master. Behind Zhu Yan, Li Wuyi, whose white clothes were dyed red with blood, stepped forward and bowed. Behind him, a group of star boundary false emperors and half-saint of demon race who had defected to the star boundary said in unison, "We greet the Void Master." Senior Yu, Yang Kai was caught off guard and hurriedly helped Li Wuyi up. His position as one of the great emperors was partly due to the great emperors of the Bright Moon continent, and partly due to Li Wuyi. If Li Wuyi had also participated in the struggle for the Great Tao, Yang Kai estimated that the position of great emperors would most likely have fallen into Li Wuyi's hands. At that time, the title of Void Master would no longer be his. How could Yang Kai accept such a great kindness from Li Wuyi? Li Wuyi smiled and said, "On the path of the Great Tao, the one who reaches the top first. Master is already one of the great emperors, so please do not mention the word senior again in the future. This Li cannot accept it." Yang Kai smiled bitterly and swept his gaze over the people behind him. All he saw were pairs of fiery eyes. No matter how old Yang Kai was, no matter if he was a junior or not, now that he had been recognized by the heavens and earth as one of the great emperors, he had the entire star boundary behind him, giving them confidence and hope to clear the haze. With a solemn expression, Yang Kai cupped his fists and said, "Thank you for your hard work, everyone." Everyone hurriedly said that they didn't dare. Yang Kai took a deep breath and looked behind the crowd again. Behind them, there were many familiar faces, all of which were looking at him with respect. Among those faces, Zhu Qing, Su Yan Shuiyu, Shanqing Luo, Xianing Chang, Ji Yao, and others were all glowing with pride. This was their man. This was also the future hope of the star boundary. Chapter 3798. At the back of the crowd, Lan Sun walked up with red eyes and bowed gracefully. "Many thanks to Void Master for avenging my father's death. Star Soul Palace is deeply grateful." Yang Kai smiled bitterly again. "Junior sister Lan is too serious. I have received Master Bright Moon's kindness, and have achieved what I have today. How could I not do my best?" Hearing him call her junior sister Lan as usual, Lan Sun almost burst into tears again. "In the future, if brother has any errands, my Star Soul Palace will definitely not refuse." Xiao Chun, who was following closely behind her, couldn't help but feel a trace of sadness and helplessness. Yang Kai took a deep breath and said, "Let's talk about future matters in the future. Right now, we have to get through this crisis first." While speaking, Yang Kai's thoughts flickered, and everyone present felt their vision blur. Before they could react, they suddenly appeared on top of a high mountain. Turning their heads, they saw that this mountain peak was the High Firmament Peak. They couldn't help but be moved. They were all on the battlefield a few hundred kilometers away from the High Heaven Palace. Being able to appear here in an instant was undoubtedly Yang Kai's doing. But thinking about how Yang Kai was now a great emperor, it was understandable. Only the great emperors could do such a thing. As far as the eye could see, the entire towering palace was in shambles. Under the attack of the demon race, the High Heaven Palace's sect protecting array was broken. The demon race poured in from all directions and fought a decisive battle with the star boundary's people on this last piece of land, resulting in countless casualties on both sides. At this moment, the entire High Heaven Palace was piled with countless human and demon corpses. This place, which used to be a beautiful place, was now like an azure purgatory. The demon land had already expanded to the High Heaven Palace, and the High Heaven Palace was now filled with demon intent. If left alone, this last piece of land would be destroyed in a short time. At that time, there would be no place for the human race in the astral boundary. Under everyone's gazes, Yang Kai slowly floated in the air with a solemn expression. Invisible Taoist connotation flowed out from him, causing people to involuntarily feel a sense of worship. Pairs of eyes couldn't help but lose focus. Boom! Yang Kai felt a silent shock in the depths of his heart. His hands flew up and quickly formed a seal. Until now, no one had been able to understand what it was. As the seals changed, with Kai Yang as the center, waves of air visible to the naked eye began to ripple outwards. Everyone couldn't help but widen their eyes and look around in amazement. They saw that wherever the ripples passed, the scattered demonic chi in the High Heaven Palace seemed to be pushed out and rolled out with the ripples. In the beginning, the frequency of the ripples spreading was not high, and the speed was not fast, but as time passed, the ripples continued to expand and soon spread throughout the entire High Heaven Palace, continuing to expand outwards. A deep and solemn voice resounded throughout the world. In the name of the void, return the light to this heaven and earth disperse. Asterisk boom. Asterisk waves of air exploded, and a halo of incomparably solid light emerged from beneath Yang Kai's feet and spread in all directions. Wherever the halo covered, the demon intent was eliminated, and the demon land melted away, returning the earth to its original appearance. Even the haze that had been shrouding the High Heaven Palace was unable to resist the baptism of this heaven and earth. A huge hole appeared in the sky, and dazzling sunlight shone down from the sky, giving people the illusion that they had come to another world. The hole in the sky rapidly expanded outwards, and the demon land on the ground was also constantly shrinking. Asterisk boom boom boom. Asterisk ring after ring of halos continued to vibrate at a unique frequency. Li Wuyi's expression froze, and as if thinking of something, his figure flickered and disappeared in an instant. Not long after, he suddenly reappeared with a look of excitement on his face. General Master, what did you find? Bingyan asked quietly. Li Wuyi was pleasantly surprised. The Pure Land is expanding. Really? Zhuyan asked in surprise. I saw it with my own eyes. As soon as these words came out, everyone was excited, although everyone had already guessed it from Yang Kai's actions and the changes in the High Heaven Palace. When Li Wuyi personally confirmed this news, they were certain. The expansion of the Pure Land meant that the Star Boundary Army's range of activities would increase in the future, and they would no longer have to defend a place like the High Heaven Palace, so they wouldn't be as passive as before. After years of oppression, was it finally time to retaliate? The demon race laid down a great array and used boundless demon intent to erode the star boundary. Many great emperors of the star boundary were trapped, and no one could resist. Although the two great elders of the dragon race had the power of great emperors, they were not great emperors. They could work together to fight against the three demon saint, but they couldn't do anything about the demon intent that was eroding the universe. Yang Kai was different. He carried the will of the heavens and was recognized by the heavens and earth. Now in the entire star boundary, he was the only great emperor. In other words, his body was the spokesperson of the heavens and earth, so he could naturally borrow the power of the heavens and earth to protect the benefits of this world. This was something that only the great emperors could do. No matter how strong the two great elders of the dragon race were, they couldn't make bricks without straw. The halo of light continued to oscillate outward, and wherever it passed, the demon intent was eliminated, and the Pure Land was restored. Li Wuyi frowned again. But after being eroded, the heavens and earth are somewhat different from before. Although Yang Kai was currently borrowing the power of the heavens and earth to disperse the demon intent and expand the Pure Land, Li Wuyi keenly noticed that the places that were once contaminated by the demon land were different. What's different? Everyone asked. Li Wuyi shook his head. I can't say. It wasn't as simple as losing vitality. It seemed to be more serious. The spiritual auspicious aura has been lost, so it's naturally different. Yang Kai's hands didn't stop moving as he sighed faintly. When Emo Sheng told him about the spiritual auspicious aura, he didn't quite understand what it was. But at this moment, how could he not understand? If the heavens and earth were alive, then the spiritual auspicious aura would be the essence of the heavens and earth. The expansion of the demon intent didn't just transform the land of the star boundary into the demon land. It also devoured the spiritual auspicious aura of the heavens and earth. Although Yang Kai could now borrow the power of the heavens and earth to expel the demon intent and reduce the size of the demon land, he couldn't get back what he had lost. 1,000 kilometers, 10,000 kilometers, 100,000 kilometers, 1,000,000 kilometers, in less than the time it takes to burn a stick of incense. With the High Heaven Palace as the center, the demon intent within 1,000,000 kilometers was completely purged. While speaking, a humming sound suddenly came from the heavens and earth, followed by an ethereal aura rising from the east. Although this aura wasn't strong, it caused everyone's heart to skip a beat as a feeling of unease welled up in their hearts. It's about time. Yang Kai took a deep breath as he looked towards the east and suddenly shouted, "Emo Sheng, get out of the star boundary, or this king will make you rest here forever." As soon as the name Emo Sheng came out, Li Wuyi and the two elders from the dragon race paled and hurriedly followed Yang Kai's gaze. They had heard of this name from Yang Kai before, so they knew what it meant. This was the great demon god of the demon territory. The reason why the demon territory became the demon territory was related to this person. The last time Yang Kai returned from the demon territory, he had told them about his encounter with Emo Sheng's doppelganger, so they had been on guard against him. However, the war of the two realms had been going on for so long, but they hadn't seen the so-called great demon god cause any trouble. Only the disappearance of the great emperor seemed to be related to him. No one had expected that at the critical moment when the dark clouds of the star boundary were about to be parted, this guy would actually show up. Thinking about it, it wasn't strange. According to the information brought back by Yang Kai, Emo Sheng wanted to devour the star boundary's spirit aura to heal his wounds. But now he had failed at the last moment. Even the demon intent corroding the star boundary and the demon land were being purified and forced back by Yang Kai. So how could he hold himself back? Whether he was willing or not, he had to show up. However, this was the terrifying existence that had once killed the flowing time great emperor, the great emperors. He was also a strange powerhouse that came from outside the universe. Even though he hadn't recovered yet, no one dared to underestimate him. Except for Li Wuyi and the two elders of the dragon race, the others didn't know what Yang Kai meant when he said Emo Sheng. However, they soon understood. The demonic chi of the entire star boundary was converging towards the east, and at a speed visible to the naked eye, an incomparably huge figure slowly appeared in the east. The figure's head reached the sky, and its feet stepped on the ground. The demonic chi around its body was tumbling and squirming, and the strange demonic chi from before was transmitted from this figure. However, unlike the weak demonic chi at first, this demonic chi had become extremely terrifying. Moreover, as the demonic chi of the entire star boundary converged, a sensational pressure descended from the sky. Even though it was far away, the huge figure still gave everyone a feeling of invincibility. It could even be said that they couldn't even think of going against it. Everyone paled in horror. The two elders of the dragon race also looked extremely dignified. They were shocked to find that in terms of demonic chi alone, this huge shadow was stronger and more terrifying than any of the great emperors. The giant shadow roared and thunder rolled. Slowly, a huge face emerged from its head. Others might not recognize this face, but how could Yang Kai not recognize it? It was exactly the appearance of Emo Sheng he had encountered before. However, the one in front of him was the great demon god's main body. The one he had killed in the ancient battlefield of the small sealed world was just a clone. "We meet again." The mouth on the squirming giant face opened and closed, and a deafening voice came out. When it spoke, a faint smile even appeared on the giant face. "Get out of the star boundary." Yang Kai coldly stared back at the giant pair of eyes,
a scorching heat radiating from them. Whether he wanted to admit it or not, his demon eye of annihilation and black purgatory eyes both came from this great demon god. So now that his true body had appeared, he was immediately affected. You are very strong, reaching this height in such a short time. Even this king has not seen many people with your aptitude. What do you think? Is the scenery here wonderful? Emoshing asked as if he didn't feel Yang Kai's hostility. I will enjoy the scenery myself. It has nothing to do with you. If you leave the star boundary now, this king will let bygones be bygones. But if you insist on being stubborn, don't blame this king for being ruthless. Ha 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 ha. Emoshing laughed, his giant face filled with joy, as if he had heard a very good joke. Amidst his laughter, the entire star boundary changed. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.